Good evening and welcome to the Gin and Tonic Show on Friday, the 11th of January, 2019. We'll be covering Surah 2 Al-Baqarah, the cow, part 2. We'll be going through some of the verses continuing on from last week. And I want to bring in my co-panelists, Stop Spamming, Thunderous, and Why So Religious. Good evening, guys. How are you keeping?
Hi, well.
Good. We have a wealth of information here on the panel. All of us, quote unquote, Islamophobes, supposedly, or this delusional word. So there we go. But we're happy to have Muslims. As we always say, if you are a Muslim and you're watching and you want to come and join us, we'll have an interesting, friendly discussion. We are adults here. We're not going to swear. But if you come in and you want to share your perspective, then obviously part of that is critiquing what you think we are saying and what we think of what a discussion is all about. So if you are a Muslim, then free to join us or message some of your friends if you know people that feel like they can come online and have a discussion. And with that said, let me hand over to Stops, who will do the positive hadith of the day.
Right. Another thing I quickly want to add, I don't know if we need to do this every time, but it seems a lot of people still don't get it. We don't criticize and we don't attack individual Muslims. We are not unfair to individual people. All we are doing is we're looking at ideas. Now, unfortunately, Islam is a collection of ideas, and that's all it is. And we are looking at those ideas, and we are analyzing and researching what is behind those ideas, and then we give our opinions on those. And those are not always positive because the material is not so positive. So it's not my fault that there are so many inconsistencies, so many contradictions, so many mistakes in the Quran. I did not write this. So it's not my fault if I see these things that I talk about them. This is not me attacking the Quran. I was not born to attack the Quran. I just see these things, and that's why I comment on them. But, and this is the important point that Rob was making in the beginning, we also have no problem whatsoever to point out the positive aspects, because there are positive aspects in Islam, and I'm very happy, we are all happy to point them out. And if people would take them on board and act only according to those, we'd be more than happy. Also, I don't care if somebody believes something. It's up to them. Just don't push it on others. And here now is an example of a very nice hadith, a saying of the Prophet Muhammad, which today Rob has found. And it was narrated by Aisha. A man said to the Prophet, "My mother died suddenly, and I think that if she could speak, she would have given in charity. May I give in charity on her behalf?" And he, the Prophet Muhammad, said, "Yes, give in charity on her behalf." I think this is very nice, that you don't need to be around anymore, so that others can decide that charity is something that is worthwhile and that is something that supports others. And I think that's good that this sentiment exists in Islam.
Yeah, indeed. If somebody was charitable, that's what they would have wanted to do. And you follow, essentially kind of following their wishes or what they would have done if they were here. Quite right. Good. And I obviously agree with you. And again, we often get asked, presumably my colleagues here also get asked, why is it that you only find the bad things? Because the claim is that this is the perfect religion, worldview, ideology for all people for all time. If they said it was an ideology that's got some good, some bad, okay, cool. And they acknowledge the bad and pointed out the good, no problem. But they ignore the bad and try to point out only the good. And that's cherry picking. And we're not going to have that because it gives an unfair and inaccurate representation of what this ideology is. And those people that, as we often say, are much better than their God anyway. So those people want to ignore it or want to reinterpret it because inside they're going, this doesn't sit well with me.
Yeah, and this is exactly why you are asking a very, very valid question. Give me something useful, give me something convincing, give me something compelling, and this is going to then convince me. I am more than willing to change my mind and accept if there is something compelling. So if a Muslim comes around and he has something positive, he has something nice, he has something good, go ahead, give it to us.
Yeah, I mean, that's fine. And the challenge, here's the two challenges for me. One is to demonstrate that this ideology is true. I think that's a mountain that's too high to climb. But secondly, on top of that, demonstrate for me that this ideology has something uniquely good that all of us on this panel, regardless of our worldviews that are non-Muslims, would agree is good, that you can only find in Islam. If you can do that, you now have something unique that we need to take a look at, that we all agree is good, that you cannot find anywhere else. And that would be of interest for us to go, okay, we need to grab that from Islam and we need to use that and we need to acknowledge Islam for that, because without that, we couldn't find that anywhere else. That challenge, as far as I can tell, has never been met. But if you could, we're definitely open to that. Good. So with that said, let's do a few comments here and then we'll get into it. We won't take as much time. Sometimes we linger on the comments, but I think sometimes it's useful for people to add something. So Stops, this was yours, and you highlight this little bit here. So do you want to do this? Because obviously this was a Facebook interaction by the look of it. Or have you stepped away there?
I don't really know that there is so much to say about this. What is quite funny is that you have people who, I don't know how they do it. Every hour you have a Muslim putting a picture of something and then a verse, a sentence, some I don't know what on the respective Facebook group, and then you comment on this and you think, how is this possible? And then what I'm doing at the moment, if they say that, for example, the Prophet was the best of all people on this planet, I then ask the question, okay, let me see, what is your morality like? Let me ask you one question. Do you think there can be any kind of justification to have any kind of sexual activity with a 9-year-old girl? And the reaction to this is amazing. And this is an example where the guy says, instead of talking about age, I believe that there is no justification okay, whatever, physical relationship with an underage girl. And now comes the caveat, who is not yet reached marriageable age. So they can never go. And I mean, they will say, Muhammad never had sex with Aisha when she was 9. She was 17, 19, 21, 28. It doesn't really matter. But then if you go, all right, great. So you are able to condemn anyone who would have sex with a 9-year-old girl, right? No, you can't, because there just might be the possibility that the hadith are correct, that Muhammad did have sex with Aisha when she was 9, and they can't condemn this because it was Muhammad. And this is why they always have this caveat there. And it's the contortions they go through like this. And this is why I highlighted this. Not yet reached marriageable age. And this term marriageable age is then something they take as a definition from the hadith, from the Quran, from whatever, not really, but from the scholars. And then they're happy with it. But they will not outright and not categorically condemn someone who has sex with a 9-year-old. And this is why I put this up there, that it is so amazing how the morality is so corrupted that people simply cannot condemn anyone who has sex with a 9-year-old because they're afraid that just maybe this was Muhammad.
Yeah, and all sort of excuses that come along. They'll point out what they claim happened in Christianity, or what happened in the old days in England, or what happened in the US, or whatever the case is. And if indeed any of those happened, we would condemn that today. If they didn't happen, or if they can point the evidence, then, I think most of us would condemn that was the case. But there's all kinds of ways, as you say, Stops, of trying to avoid this. And here's the other thing, because obviously we read the other day, I think when we were chatting as a group, at some point anyway, or maybe it was last week, but the hadith with I think Baisha pointed this out, the hadith with Aisha playing with dolls. So question for you guys: if there was a grown up or a grown up person who still played with dolls today, who acted in the same way that a child would play with dolls, would we say that she is mentally ready or able or cognizant to consent to having sex?
If I may just clarify there, the hadith mentions that when she was married, that's when she had her dolls, and then she moved to Muhammad. It doesn't mention that when she was consummating that she still played with dolls. So just for a clarification there, because they might say, oh, well, the hadith doesn't say she was playing with dolls when she was consummated the marriage, because then that means if she was consummating the marriage, she was of puberty age, and that Islam forbids playing with dolls after puberty.
And also, can I just add on that, in one of the commentaries in one of the Qur'ans that I have, there's an incident where she's accused, or someone's accusing Aisha of adultery. She's in a litter of children and she gets left behind somewhere. So she's already described as Muhammad's wife, and she's in a litter of children. So when you add all the pieces together, it's kind of obvious when you join the dots what we're actually dealing with.
Yeah. And there's a question from the chat. Maybe it was Muhammad's doll, an inflatable one.
Yeah, if they had inflatable things in those days. I think the point, though, is you hear from certain apologists, and you were talking about it with when Armin Navabi interviewed Imam Tawhidi and the other, Sunni sort of more fundamentalist fella that's supposed to be studying in some university or other, Daniel somebody or other, and he was like, yes, it's okay.
I challenge you to say the name.
Oh no. I'd have to read it. I don't even know. It starts with an H, I think, but I cannot remember. Haji, Daji, Laji. I'm butchering. Yeah. But he said, no, it is. And then he asked Armin Navabi, is it, does he condemn, I can't remember the words used, but along the lines of, is this always wrong? Essentially, I'm paraphrasing. Or is it only in that context? Is it conditionally or contextually wrong, or always wrong? And obviously Armin said, always wrong. And I don't remember what he said after that. So for him, it was a case of, it was correct. But the point that I was asking you guys is, if we came across somebody that appeared considerably older but was still playing with dolls, do you think we would agree, or would you guys agree that that person is quite possibly, or even probably, not at an age mentally to be able to have informed consent, shall we say? Because they are demonstrating, even though they're older, they're demonstrating that their brain is still at a stage, or very likely at a stage of a child. In which case, it doesn't matter how old the body is. I mean, you could have a 50-year-old who plays with dolls, because we know that there are people whose brains are underdeveloped even when they are adults, and they are not able to consent. In which case, they still need guardians or parents or whatever the case is. So I think that's the point.
Well, I think the counter to that Islamically would be that you're not supposed to have even consensual sex outside of marriage, or without, your slaves, right? The people that your right hands possess. So what I would say, that if you're going to use that argument to tackle Islam, you could use that argument to tackle anybody that isn't Muslim. Right. But for Islam, you'd have to use it as somebody who's playing with dolls still. Should they be given into marriage? They don't have a say in it. They can't really comprehend what is going to happen with the rest of their lives. But their guardian, as Islam says, the guardian is the one who facilitates the marriage contract and such. So the real question here is, should the guardian have the right to essentially sign away the person until the male is done with them, and declares divorce 3 times of a person who still plays with dolls and doesn't have the mental capacity to understand what's going to be brought forth in their whole life?
I mean, you could go the marriage. I mean, I was being charitable and suggesting that I think we could think of a scenario where a guardian would allow somebody to marry their child who was of, slow-witted, let's just say, for want of a better word, but with the proviso that they cannot have sex with that child or that person because they don't have the mental capability. So I suppose they could do that, but I was being charitable in the sense that even if they did that, would we agree that the child, or the person rather, would not be in a position to make that informed consent themselves, regardless of what the guardian thought?
Well, I mean, okay, if that's what you want to do.
That's a counter to.
I was looking at the Islamic stance, which is no, you can't have sex outside of marriage unless it's with a slave, right? And then so that's gonna be their debate essentially. Is it doesn't matter if they're playing with dolls or whatever, it's just haram, it's not permissible. But when you start talking about the concept of a person of the same mental capacity being able to be thrusted into a lifestyle and a life choice that they had nothing to do with and they possibly don't even understand, that's where I would say the issue comes into play.
And I was just thinking, when you talk about, well, yeah, when you're talking about someone that's corpus mentis, isn't that what happens when Muslims inbreed anyway? The product is something that's compos mentis anyway. So I think a scenario is not too far from the truth when we're looking at the statistics of children born with the very mindset that you're talking about in England, when cousins marry as a product of Islamic inbreeding in their own communities.
Yeah, obviously that's an issue, but I mean, I think we could agree that
but the point I'm making is, when you see such a child, when you see such a person in existence, it's quite clear that that person is not of any kind of maturity, intellectually, emotionally, psychologically, academically, or at any level, or even physically for that.
Yes,
to have intercourse. So you don't have to have a far-fetched image in your mind, because those images of such people are already in existence in our society today, and you would not even conceive. In fact, I would challenge the intellect, mentality, and state of mind of the person that would consider having sexual intercourse with such a person. That's where my concern would be.
Yes, agreed, and that's why I'd focus on that, because I think we could agree. Let's say that each of us had a child, and we were, on our last legs in whatever sense, but you had a loving person who said, look, I realize that, this person's going to grow up. They're not able to, and I won't have sex, but I will take care of them. Can I marry them? And my marriage is to take care of them, but not to have sex with them. I think if that was me, and I was giving away a child, and I knew that I didn't have long to live, and this person guaranteed that they wouldn't take advantage, then I could see myself saying, okay, you can marry her. She can't make that decision, but you could marry her to take care of her because I won't be around, but you're not permitted to have sex because she's never going to be in a position to have informed consent. That's why the marriage thing for me wasn't quite as much of an issue as the sex thing, because I could conceive that you could do that, but you could never conceive. I don't see how you could conceive of a person that's dim-witted like that, where you could offer them in any way for sex, as you've said, but you could offer them in marriage if the marriage had certain conditions, as I stated, like as an example. Anyway,
so it's a form of slavery in Islam. What you're talking about would be a form of slavery, because because the woman has to do whatever the man says. Right.
No,
and she would not be able. She wouldn't be able to leave the house without his permission. She wouldn't be able to go to college or learn to read and write without his permission. So at least if it was with consummation, at least that would be the actual family unit concept that humans have come to agree with and notify as a marriage. Without that, without the possibility of even childbearing, or without equal rights, then what would it be? It'd be a form of slavery.
I think Weiss has actually hit on a fantastic point there, because you're actually, if you're going to marry, you're actually putting that person in the further burden rather than the release of protection, because they would have to walk where they have a family guardian to protect them, and that you're actually putting more restriction on them.
Oh, sorry, you guys are.
I would equally challenge to say, well, why would you want to marry such a person? Why not adopt them? Surely that would be the more loving provision, and gives that person more freedom. If you adopt them, why would you feel the need to marry them?
Yeah, I mean, you could adopt them. Sure. Okay, so you guys thought I was talking about specifically Muslims. I just made the case in general about a person that was slow-witted and so forth. I mean, okay, obviously we're talking about Islam, but in my mind, when I made the comment, it was like, would we ever do this under any circumstances, I guess was, and maybe I didn't communicate that clearly. So you thought I was talking specifically about Islam. But yeah, I mean, you bring up a good point, Andres. Maybe adoption is a better way. If this person said, I really care about this person, they're not part of my family. Okay, so I'm about to, pass away. My daughter, for example, is slow-witted, whatever the case is, cannot take care of herself, or doesn't have the cognitive capability. I would rather you adopted her, in which case you would never have sex because she couldn't in any way consent to that Yeah, so that probably would be a better way of doing it, I would imagine.
But I also
Anyway.
don't know. I don't know of any Western country where marriage isn't consensual by person to person. So when you're talking and when you're thinking of it as just as a guardianship, right? That would still mean that you are negating that person's individual, even if they're dim-witted, even if they can't really conceive things. It's like saying, oh, well, I'm gonna marry off my mentally retarded child to somebody. Well, what gives you the right to do that is the question, because
easy, because that person can't take care of themselves and doesn't have the ability to do it. But I think Thunderous's point is, would adoption be a better strategy? Possibly, yes. But if the person said, hey, I'd rather marry her and I promise never to have sex with her, but I want her as my wife because it feels better to me, I'll take better care of her and I won't have sex with her. And he says, well, if I adopted her, it just wouldn't be the same. I mean, you could argue the point backwards and forwards, but to answer your question, I think it's very easy. If the person doesn't have the cognitive capability, then you are, and we do this all the time, why so? People who don't have the cognitive ability, their loved ones or guardians or whatever make the decision for them because they can't, they don't have the capability.
They go through a court system. Okay. And then the judges tend to decide what is the best outcome based off of doctors, based off of various means, if they have to be put into a care facility as opposed to living with a loved one or a person close to them in their immediate family. It's not this concept that you're pushing, well, it seems to me that you're pushing, that just because somebody is mentally deficient, that they don't have to have consent to the people that you are officially marrying them to. Okay, because if you're going to marry them and let's say but they don't even understand the concept of marriage or divorce, then that means that person is stuck there until the courts come in later on and find out from outside sources that there's been a mistreatment or this and that. And then they have to do a divorce process, and then they have to figure out and then there has to be another process through the courts of where is this person going to go? Who's going to facilitate for the rest of their lives? I just see a huge problem with it. I'm not trying to drag it on. I just see a huge problem with doing that.
All right, well, let's move on. Otherwise, we'll never get through all of these. Here's the other one. Stops. So you obviously asked this fella. You forgot to answer my question. Can you categorically condemn sex with a 9-year-old child? I guess you meant that, or children, or with 9-year-old children. Yeah. Can you rephrase the question? You will got an answer. Got answer. How much clearer could that question possibly be for this person?
It's obvious he does not want to answer.
Yeah, well, can you rephrase the question? I mean, you could be a bit crude about it. Do you categorically condemn effing children or a 9-year-old child? But then presumably he would take offense to that. So, I mean, I'm not sure how much easier and more polite and clear you could possibly be. So
how about maybe asking, how would you feel if a 54-year-old experienced penis entered into a 9-year-old virgin's vagina for the first time?
Yeah, I guess, yes, you could ask it like that as well. That, that would probably get the response that I think you sometimes do, or somebody else. I don't know. Oh, no, it's some dude on Hangouts, the Saved by Grace character on Hangouts does this all the time. And I've called him out on it. He comes on a Hangout and just talks about Muhammad, the pedo Muhammad, and the vagina and the, penis and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, dude, So yes, I suppose you could ask it like that, but he often gets kicked off Hangouts. So I'm not sure how far you'd go with that. Shall we stop? You sent me those other things. Should we keep those for perhaps another time, and then we'll just get
straight into it? No problem.
Okay, cool. So
and it's a different topic altogether.
Maybe get that poster out. There was a comedy show in America several years ago called Married with Children.
Yes.
I remember somebody doing a mock image of that, with the caption "Married to Children." Maybe we should ask our Muslim friends that, if there's a better way to ask.
I like that.
That could be a comedy show.
That appeals to my sense of humor.
All right, boys, let's get on to it. So here's Surah. Sorry, somebody want to say something? All right, let's move on to Surah 2:7. This was what we did last week. So Allah has set a seal on their hearts and on their hearing and on their vision is a veil, and for them is a punishment great. I think we agreed that obviously appeared to negate free will to some degree, if not more than some degree. I'm being charitable there. So that was the one that we ended on last week. And then it's 2:8 here. I'll do Sai International. And of the people are some who say, we believe in Allah and the last day, but they are not believers. And of the people are some who say, we believe in Allah and the last day, but they are not believers. Okay. Is there anything you want to put there? Because obviously there's a bit more context to this.
Yeah, this will come.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking here. Okay. So we can go through some of these verses a bit quicker. They think to deceive Allah and those who believe, but they deceive not themselves. Deceive not, except themselves, and perceive it not. So again, this goes back to what you were talking about last time, Stops, is now we get into the surahs and the verses that talk about the disbelievers and how much of the Quran this actually takes up, as opposed to giving the believers all the clear instructions.
Rob, this is different. This one talks about the believers who are hypocrites.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Oh, okay. Right.
So this is an example of where the Quran takes several sentences on one topic.
Okay, but if they're hypocrites, or do they know they're hypocrites? In which case, they aren't true believers then, are they?
Well, they give lip service. It's almost like they're giving lip service to following, but in their hearts are far removed from the reality.
So presumably then they're not true believers.
Yeah.
So they're saying what they don't believe. Is that true? Or do they believe what they're saying is in fact true?
It's lip service. They're basically saying with their lips that they believe, but their hearts are far removed from the reality of what Muhammad is saying.
Yeah, but they're also active. They seek to deceive Allah. This is the point.
Mm-hmm. When obviously he cannot be deceived anyway, right? So they can only deceive, and they can't even deceive themselves. They know that it's not true in their hearts, as you were saying. So presumably, really, the only people they could deceive is other people around them. Okay.
Only if Allah wills it.
Yes, bring that little spanner in the works.
Well, I mean, that's a very important theme inside the Quran. And that's the reason when I debate Muslims, sometimes I tell them, we just have to admit that we're not going to agree on things because Allah has decided not to allow me to agree with you. You know, that's what your belief says. So we need to move past it and continue on.
Well, presumably, why? So you have this discussion with people. What's their response? Because, of course, I can imagine them saying they've got free will, but here you apparently have a contradiction. So if you do, and I'm sure you do point this out, what is typically their response to this?
A lot of times Muslims just agree with me and move on. Most of the time.
If they agree with you, then they are essentially giving up or surrendering the idea of free will, right?
They don't see it that way. That you know, it's one of those things. I always say most people nowadays have religious privilege where they don't have to believe the religion that they follow, like the original people had to follow it, strenuous or with the penalties. But the topic that we're talking about right now is definitely cognitive dissonance, where they don't want to see the fact of what I said implies that they have no bearing on. All they can do is tell me to read the Quran or recite it to me, and then at that moment it's up to Allah if he decides to raise the veil, as it says in 7, you know, that he put a seal in our hearts on verse 7, or if he decides to take it off.
But is there anywhere in your guys' experience in the Quran where it states that he can take it off? Because if we read back into 7 there, it says he's put a veil over their vision. So well, presumably, I mean, he could, but it seems to suggest that he's done it.
I'd have to find it, but there is the verse in the Quran where Allah talks about people who have believed, then disbelieved, and then believed, and then disbelieved, and then believed again, and then that on Judgment Day it's his decision.
Okay, but presumably he knew they were going to do all of this anyway.
Correct. But just to answer your question, yes, he can raise the veil. If he wasn't able to raise the veil, there would be a huge thing about the powers of Allah. And then the second part would be the biggest problem, which is that nobody could become new Muslims. Right? Because then that would mean that if you're 5 years old and you start becoming a Christian because you just like the concept of a guy walking on water, and then you actually start believing it as you grow older, and Allah has that veil on you that you're not a true believer, and then that would mean that you could never become a Muslim, and that would be applied to everybody in the world, right? Theologically.
Okay, but that being the case, then presumably Muslims will say that 2:7 doesn't apply to everybody all the time. Then, so this putting
actually, it has to, because there's a surah in the Quran about Muhammad's uncle, I believe, where Allah says that he will never be a believer, and that he and his wife are already condemned to hell. So Allah has already made that decision that that person will never be a believer.
So he's negated his free will. Okay, cool. Yeah. All righty.
Sorry for the discourse.
All right, cool. So these are hypocrites, as Stops was saying. So they presumably say that they believe, but don't actually believe in their hearts. Okay, 2:10. In their hearts is disease, so Allah has increased their disease, and for them is a painful punishment because they habitually used to lie. So that's just, again, cementing what the previous verse seemed to say. If we go through, obviously, if I think of something, I'll bring it up. If I go through and I'm going to move on and you guys go, hang on a moment, just jump in if you want to say something about a verse that maybe I don't think of.
I think in these verses, there's already a precedence being set there about believe, or about whether you believe or whether you don't believe. If you do believe, all well and good, but if you don't believe, he's setting the stall out for, this is the kind of person you are. You look at the rhetoric and the language, disease in the hearts, painful punishment, used to lie. They're all, and nobody really wants to be identified like that. And Muhammad's clearly talking to an audience that he's hoping would not be made to feel, because nobody wants to feel diseased or or looking forward to a painful punishment. So I think the propaganda is being set out here about as to what kind of person you are, and the person who wants to feel positive about themselves, they're going to side onto Muhammad's side about being blessed by Allah, the glorious of the people of this generation. He's setting his stall out, so to speak, as to with reference to the mentality of the audience that he's already got there. So I feel when I'm listening to this and when I've been going through before, he's a very manipulative man and very, if you like, discerning of the audience he's speaking to and how to get at them and what words to use to get at them.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's an emotional appeal as opposed to, hey, people, I think you should be believed because of the abundance of evidence and good reasons.
Like any deception, it works at the emotive level. It doesn't work at the logical level, because the logical level will destroy. The emotive level is, I think, I know you guys don't want the Bible to be brought in here, but just to use one phrase, it says, the heart, I think it's in the book of Jeremiah, the heart is more treacherous and desperate. And another scripture says, do not be misled. And the context of the do not be misled is when you mislead yourselves. Because when you rationalize yourself to do it, irrespective of what your outside influences are, I mean, how many of us have done things that we know were wrong, but we kind of justified it within ourselves? And I think the same thing is going on in here. He's appealing to the heart at the emotional level, and he's getting them to rationalize against themselves as well by using this very clever language.
Yeah, or drop, as you say, drop the rationality, because I think logic and emotion are like oil and water. They don't work together. And as you say, and my experience being, emotion once you have somebody emotional, it overrides their logic anyway. So if you have somebody that's in an emotional state, they will very likely make a decision that isn't entirely or potentially completely illogical or badly thought out. So it's an effective technique to use to persuade people, is the emotional appeal.
If we look at the comment I made was about inciting people. You can incite people to love, but you can also incite people to war when you consider riots. It only takes one or two people to incite the riot, then all of a sudden all those peaceful people become violent people or aggressive people or riotous people. And that's what he's doing there. He's very clever at inciting at the emotive level.
Good. Number 211. And when it is said to them, do not cause corruption on the earth, they say, but we are but reformers. So that's an interesting one. And I wonder if that's ever been used to people like Tawhidi or Majid Nawaz or anything like that, who, potentially are seen as, quote, reformers. You could always point to this verse here, or could you? Let me ask the question. It appears to suggest that could be the case. So if you're trying to reform things, then you are potentially going to cause corruption. So I don't know if that's ever been used. 212. Unquestionably, it is they who are the corrupters, but they perceive it not. So again, just the same sort of. And again, guys, explain this to me. We've just said this. They do not cause corruption. They say, but we are the reformers. Unquestionably, they are. It is they who are the corrupters, but they perceive it not. It's sort of. Okay, I know I'm going to say this many times, presumably as we go through this, but it's just so, to my mind, and maybe it sounds wonderful in Arabic, it's just so badly written. I mean,
oh, absolutely, it's disjointed. It's not discernible. It's you can't read it straight, or can you? It's haphazard. It's not consistent. It's not fluid. It's just awful, isn't it? It's awful. It's incoherent.
I remember when I started reading it the first time, it felt to me like my mind was in prison. It was like, and when I stopped after a while, it was like a weight had been taken off my shoulders. And when I went back to it, it's like you're going back into prison for a while to go and, see what it's like. And that's my, remembering the first time. And obviously everybody's got a different experience. I remember some fellow that Muslims pointed out to me in a video, this white professor in the US, I think, who read this and obviously had a tendency towards a God or whatever the case is. I think he was Christian or whatever, and read some particular verse, which I'm sure we'll come to, about an angel talking about how there's, wasn't the fall of man supposedly, or words to this effect. I'm paraphrasing, so forgive me, it's not entirely, but, in the Garden of Eden, and he just thought this was the most wonderful thing, and that started his journey down the road of becoming a Muslim. So whereas my experience was very different, and people point this out as if he's the guy to follow because he had the specific interpretation of a particular verse in the Quran. All right,
if I may, I think if I may, I think
add something.
Go ahead, Stops.
I just want to say this mischief, this corruption, this is being used something like 78, 79 times in the Quran, and it is not explained, not once. Now, we need to clarify something. A non-theist, okay, like me, somebody without a God belief, we react to the theist. It's always by definition, okay? It doesn't work any other way. So if you remove the believer, then the non-believer automatically disappears, also always by definition. So what mischief exactly can a non-believer create? A non-believer simply doubts something, okay, that's it. And yet the dissenters, they make the non-believer look irrational. Like not believing what the Quran says is incredibly stupid, as though everything is clear and logical. And, the non-believer, like a stubborn idiot kid or something, simply refuses it. And you see this repeated in the next sentence. This is unbelievably condescending. Like, oh, how could you? With one eyebrow raised. Don't make mischief. Come on, we don't really want anything. And then you see in the next sentence, indeed, they themselves are the one who spread corruption, but they don't realize it. No, it's not like that at all. It's not that I'm a stupid idiot who doesn't realize what they are doing by asking questions. That is not what it is. So this is being amazingly condescending and amazingly nonsensical in my eyes.
Yeah, especially if you look at... Go ahead, Weiser.
What I was going to say is I don't see how y'all don't read it in a way that I'm reading it, where they're saying, but we are reformers, right? And then in the MAS Abdel Halim, the Oxford World Classics version, it says, we are only putting things right. Okay, so what this is totally going against is allowing any type of reform inside of Islam. It is exactly how it is supposed to be. And whatever Allah says is defined as what it is. And you are not allowed to come and try to, it goes to 3:7 of the Quran also. We accept the whole of the book and not the allegorical type thing, where a reformer is a hypocrite. Okay. Majid Nawaz, as he likes to think of himself as a reformer, right? He would be defined as the hypocrite on this verse.
Absolutely.
And just to answer Stop's question about what is the corruption, well, if you look at every time the word corrupt appears in the Quran, and then you equate it to the corruption part, you can see it as the people of Sodom and Gomorrah or whatever, they were labeled as corrupters because they were the homosexuals, right? So that's how you're supposed to find out who, because in the Quran, Allah says that if he wanted to, his words are like the ocean, an ocean of ink, essentially, and his pen would never, the oceans would dry out before his words would. So when he's using words, he's allegedly using them in correlation to different parts of the Quran for you to piece it all together.
Yeah, I think it stops to answer you as well, just from my point of view, and give us your thoughts on this. And I agree with you, it's terribly condescending from a non-Muslim's point of view. If we put ourselves in their shoes, they've got the divine word of God, and anybody that strays or says something contrary to this is in effect causing corruption. So corruption would be anything that goes against or sidesteps or whatever the case is, whatever it says in the Quran, because they've already got the perfect word. Anything else is corruption. So it seems to me corruption could mean anything, but it certainly means anything other than what the Quran explicitly supposedly states.
It's cleverly ambiguous.
Yeah, exactly. This is what I'm saying. We are now providing the interpretation of what this corruption is because it's not explained. So we are putting our thoughts into this, and this is why, Muslim apologists, they can abuse it. They can use it any which way they want.
Yeah, possibly, but I think it's a logical deduction.
This one's a pretty I'm just saying this verse is very direct, that if you try to be a reformer or you try to be a person who allegedly makes the religion correct or right outside of what is being said, then you are spreading mischief or corruption, and you are one of the hypocrites. This is actually one of the most defined forms of corruption.
It's a logical deduction, it seems to me. It's obviously very wide. I agree with you. It's not specific, like, okay, so what does corruption mean in the context of a verse or whatever? But it seems to be logically in the sense of anything that is not what the Quran directly says. However, having said that, and to Stops's point, if there are so many different interpretations and they're all genuinely supposedly reading it what they believe to be accurate, they're not trying to cause corruption, they're in fact trying to understand it, and you have all these different interpretations. Presumably, if there are different interpretations, either one of them is correct or they're all wrong, in which case they're not explicitly doing it on purpose, but they are in some way corrupting it. Because if there was only one interpretation, everybody agreed, and then anybody else that said something different, then it would be clear who the corrupter is. But who is the corruptors actually? I mean, is it Abu Mufti Layth, for example? Is he a corrupter? Or is it Imam Tawhidi? Or is it Daniel Haji fella?
Exactly.
Who is the corrupter?
Everybody except Muhammad.
Yes. And how do we know exactly what Muhammad actually said clearly? That's the other side.
And now we're going into the direction that we said, because now it's going towards the non-believers, threatening them. This is now when it's going towards the idiots, the fools, the people who don't know what they are doing, and that is why they are rejecting the message in the Quran.
Interesting. Yeah, so that's an interesting one. All right, that's 2:12, 2:13. And when it is said to them, believe as the people have believed, they say, should we believe as the foolish have believed? Unquestionably, it is they who are the foolish, but they know it not.
Exactly.
So again, just sort of re-emphasizing it there. And I guess this will happen quite a bit with this. Maybe it's a case of, you wonder, let's assume for a moment we were charitable and this did actually represent what Muhammad said. We know that it's not in the right order. I think that's clear through the research that it's not in a chronological order. But let's assume for a moment that all of this is in fact not that God sent it to him, but in fact that this was kind of what he recited. That whole process was accurate. Is it a case that repeating it multiple times is it, and to ask Thunderous, because he was talking about it earlier as well, is it a case of the appealing to people's psychology? The more times you repeat something in different ways, so if you keep saying something about how bad the non-believers are or how they're going to corrupt things or whatever, how they're foolish or whatever the case is, if you say it in different times over 23 years, presumably maybe the idea is the message will be hit home rather than if you say it once or twice.
Well, that's how it works. I mean, every time you go to a dictatorship country, for instance, and you look at the imagery is repeated over and over again. Like, you got the silhouette of the leader of the country, and in his hand he's got a bowl of rice, or in his hand he's got a child, or in his hand there's a profile of him with the flag for the country. And it's repeated over and over again. And the words are, I think it may have been Himmler, it may have been Goebbels, it may have even been Hitler itself, who said, if we repeat it enough times, people will believe it. I paraphrase the phrase there. So that's exactly what's taking place here. Repetition, over and again. And, you know, through that, you know, that form of osmosis, where what first seems a reality that becomes a fantasy, where it seeps in, where one part of the brain, you know, it lets go of the cognitive dissonance and it becomes a reality. So the cognitive dissonance that isn't there anymore, it becomes a reality, a truth now.
The other thing I wish we'd done, and it just came to me now, Stops, and I don't know if you know this, and certainly I wouldn't expect you to know it off the top of your head. What would be interesting is to know when in Muhammad's life these verses were said, but then we'd have to correlate it with the Quran that people have researched in a chronological order, which would obviously be, you know, a lot more difficult, just to understand when were these verses, quote unquote, revealed to him. Because at the moment we have no idea. Well, you and I, well, maybe you do, but most people don't know where in his life this happened, because that might be an important factor.
I have a chronological Quran if you want.
I've got.
Well, I also have a chronological Quran, but I reject it totally. I reject it completely, because the whole thing was not revealed in Mecca, was not revealed in Medina, was not revealed over 23 years.
And I've got a list, but I've never bothered to read it in any chronological. As bad enough as it is, if I read it in chronological order, it won't get any better. It'll just get worse.
Yeah,
you know,
no,
there are things where they assign a certain style to a certain time, and then they say, well, this must have been written at that and that time and point in time. Sorry, and then you have Bill Warner doing the same thing, going through the Sierra and then assigning sentences from the Quran which are likely and sort of correspond with what is happening. Of course you can do that, but this is it's just a fairy tale. It remains a fairy tale. There's nothing else. There's nothing real about this.
Most of the chronological Qurans that I come across are based off of Ibn Abbas's telling of when they came out. Just to throw that out there, it's even the chronological Quran that I own is saying that it's based off of Ibn Abbas's understanding and telling of chronological order. I have yet to see a different chronological Quran based off something else.
Yeah, when we interviewed Bill Warner, he talked about, I asked him and he said, no, he didn't do it himself. He got it from a gentleman in the 1920s or whatever it was in Belgium that had redone this, etc. I guess whichever way, if we were to take that as somewhat reasonable, at least it'd give us an insight into when he said these things, and could he be speaking to specific people, or does these verses always just automatically refer to everybody who's a non-Muslim or a non-believer or whatever the case is?
Well, I mean, Allah will speak directly to people, right? Like what I mentioned earlier about Muhammad's uncle and his wife, the carrier of firewood. That is a very direct to an individual person.
What, you know, is it Abu Lahab in 112 or what?
Yes. And the carrier of firewood, which is related to his
yes,
his wife.
I can agree with you. There'll be certain verses that will relate, but like this again, I think we could. Well, maybe I could, or maybe there's a little bit of hubris. I don't know, but one could just reword this in the sense of believe as the people have believed. They said, should we believe as the foolish people of all times who were non-Muslim or whoever will be non-Muslim believed? Then again, it would be clear that they're speaking to everybody at all times. Of course, that's not in there. And I always think to myself, well, if God knew all this, and presumably he knew that Islam would spread and, you know, we'd be where we are today, 2,000 years later, these little things would have made it so much clearer for people, you know, to read this. But it's just so vague, and could it refer to anybody? So we just assume that by reading this verse, it talks about the foolish being everybody who's presumably not Muslim or didn't follow Muhammad or the Quran.
Exactly, because who are the people? Believe as believed the people. Sure. So people believed something in the past, but why do we automatically assume it's talking about the Christians and the Jews?
That could be so.
Bearing in mind that this book is supposed to be co-equal in as far as eternity is concerned in Allah. So is it as disjointed in heaven? Or is it next is incoherence as disjointed and in non-chronological order in heaven as it is on earth as well?
Well, we don't
presumably
know that.
not.
This is the problem.
So is the book made clear, a book easy to understand when it was being revealed? Why hasn't Allah, who was said to have protected it, for the past 1400 years, if he's that capable, why did he not have it collated and collected and then written and distributed amongst mankind in a chronological order? Why is he allowed it to be like this?
Yeah, presumably a Muslim would come up with some answer. But you're right, because he could have assigned, the person, he could have assigned Muhammad a scribe who he knew would outlive Muhammad and would live long enough to put it into the perfect order. Then you wouldn't require anything else there. You would know that this person was with Muhammad from the moment he had his first revelation till the moment he died. He collated it. Maybe he had a couple of helpers and he lived with Muhammad. He saw everything Muhammad saw. This would, again, be trivially easy to do, and that would make it stronger.
Well, according to Islamic history and belief, the reason the Quran is in this particular order is because it's every Ramadan, when Muhammad, at the end of it, when Muhammad would stop receiving revelations, he would recite the whole Quran for a couple of days. And right before he died, this was the last order of which allegedly that he recited the Quran. And did
he recite it in different orders prior to that, or was it always the same?
Yes. No, it wasn't always the same. That's the reason there was verses added from I can't remember the surah exactly, but when he added inshallah, that you were supposed to say in the will of Allah, that was an actual Medina surah inside of a Mecca, a Medina verse inside of a Mecca surah. All scholars and such agree with that. This is the basic of Islam's theology, is that the last time Muhammad recited the Quran, this is what came out in this order.
The problem, of course, though, I can accept that, and that could be an answer that Muslims give, but we know that he was fooled by Satan. So again, the question is, if Allah wanted this message to come down via a human for whatever reason, in the form it did, which is perhaps not the best form, I think we can agree, but if in fact he wanted to do it this way and he had a scribe there, that scribe would then have been able to fact check and go, hang on, Muhammad, that's Satan talking through you now. So when he was possessed and didn't know what he was doing, that throws a little bit of a spanner, because then if he was the only guy around and he didn't have somebody with him 24/7, then how do we know that the other verses are not corrupted in some way, or that he wasn't mistaken somewhere else? So at the end of his life, fine, he could have, as you say, he could have dictated the Quran, but how do we know that everything in there is in fact accurate if he didn't have somebody with him, which Allah could easily have done, presumably? Because
Allah says that he made the Quran and sent it down in segments to make it easy to remember. And he also said that Allah admits that there will be parts that are either abrogated or forgotten, even by Muhammad. Okay, but that's the will of Allah, that there will be parts that other people will remember, but Muhammad didn't say it at the last time that he recited the Quran, and that's the reason they're not in there. Allah says that Muhammad will forget parts of the Quran that Allah chooses.
What's the purpose of that?
Not about just abrogation, because that's a totally different verse, but there is a verse about Muhammad will forget whatever it is save Allah chooses.
So what was the point of it ever being Go ahead, stop.
There's a question in the chat. Why don't we invite a Muslim? Number one, we do. Number two, what is the point? Is a Muslim going to say something completely different than what the Quran says? Is a Muslim going to come here and say, believers believe the people? Will he say, no, actually, this is referring to a handbrake turn on a BMW? No, it's going to be the same thing. So what is the point? What is the point of having a Muslim here when Muslims are the ones who are the least informed when it comes to the Quran? But if you want, you are more than welcome to join and give us a balanced view if you want to.
I'll
I
challenge
think
any Muslim to come on and say something that I'm saying isn't part of their belief. I'll tell you that right now, dude. Just go ahead.
yeah,
Go
I
ahead.
mean, no, but just to get another perspective, because they presumably taught something and we can hear, because I'm sure there's things that we are saying that even if we took the devil's advocate position and tried to argue everything we've heard from Muslims, there'll still be other things that we haven't heard or don't remember or whatever the case is, that they would bring as some sort of explanation, quote unquote, for this. And that's, I guess, what I want to hear is what explanation do they have for this sort of thing?
Well,
So-
Muhammad Islam said that he DM'd you. I don't know if you've checked that or not, but he said that he DM'd you for the link, because I told him that you don't post it in the chat to try to eliminate trolls, and he said okay.
Okay. So I'm just unsharing for a moment. I'm looking here quickly. So
I just
cool.
wonder if there is a counter argument. I just wonder if there is a balanced view when you are reading sentences such as what we're doing at the moment, where I do not see any chance of making any sense out of them. You can do with these sentences whatever you want. They can mean such a huge different number of things that you can't just say, okay, this is what it should mean. And this is the point. That's why we have hadiths to explain some of these things. And that's why the hadiths fail. Then you need scholars to explain this. Then you have the tafsir. You have all these different levels of interpretation for all of this, and they all fail.
While he's checking that, do y'all think it'd be a good time to mention how before we came on here, there was the discussion if we should just push through reading the Quran, or if we should discuss it more like we have been, and then maybe let the people who are here every week, try to decide if they want us to be a little bit faster or if they like the pace we're going at. Do you get what I mean? Like,
we don't get enough response on it, why, sir? So we go like this, unless
Okay.
what we can do is a poll at the end or something like that. And again, I'm not looking at the chat because obviously I'm sharing screen, and I'll go back to sharing it now. But pick up, so interrupt us along the way if you guys see questions in the chat that people are talking about here. But that's the point of this, is to go through these and to give and to ask questions, because that's what we're doing here. We are literally looking at the verses. I'm asking it from a quote novice point of view. You guys have done more research. You'll give me a view, and presumably we'll have this gentleman on. I've just sent him a link here now, and he can give a Muslim view on it, and then we can have that discussion, because this is what it's all about. Otherwise, we're always just talking about things. Here we're getting to the nitty-gritty. This is the Quran. This is what they all believe. And so let's rubber meets the road with viewers here who can listen in as well. And we've got a record of it as well, so we can always go back or send people to it as well. Okay, so let me just share the screen again. So hopefully this gentleman that you mentioned, he sent me a link on Facebook, so I have sent him the link and asked him to join us. Okay, cool. So
sorry, Muhammad Islam, that I didn't bring it up. I didn't even think about how he was screen sharing and wasn't looking at the chat. That's my fault, sir.
Yeah, no worries. I think I've sent it to him because he hasn't used that name, but somebody has contacted me in Facebook. So obviously we are friends, or he's messaged me at least. So I've sent him the link. So hopefully we'll have somebody joining us in a moment. Okay, let's move on. Obviously, if you're a Muslim and you're going to join us.
There's another thing. There's one thing we need to point out here, because again, it says they are the fools, but they don't know this. But then in another interpretation, it says is they are not aware of it. And this is very different. It's very different whether I know that I'm a fool, I'm doing it intentionally, or whether I'm being a fool and I don't know what I am doing. I don't realize that I'm being the fool. And this is also a difference where the people are assigned different levels of responsibility for their actions and for the corruption and mischief that they are spreading. So it also depends on your individual interpretation, how you see this, or whether you see, well, maybe it's not their fault. Maybe this is something where they just have doubts, and therefore Allah has sealed their hearts at the end of the day, and that's why they're deaf, dumb, and blind. But some are saying, no, it's their fault because they're actively doing it. So we need to keep this in mind, that there are different versions here.
But all three of these on the screen here seem to suggest that they know it not, but they do not know, or corpus Quran, fools but not they know. So in other words, you can be a fool, quote unquote, but is somebody a fool if they don't know something? I mean, yes, you could say that if you're a person of knowledge, but then they're not being intentionally deceptive. They are doing something that they believe to be correct, surely, because otherwise they'd be hypocrites or liars. They would intentionally be saying something that isn't true.
And that's what, if you carry on, I think I think it's here where they turn it around afterwards and say, but they knew very well what they were doing.
Oh, okay. Well, let's see. This is 214, Sahih International. And when they meet those who believe, they say, we believe. But when they are alone with the evil ones, they say, indeed, we are with you. We were only mockers.
Exactly.
Which is what we said earlier, that they agree with their mouths, but their heart is far removed from the situation. So when they go back amongst their own people, Muhammad is saying that they're mocking them when they're with their own kind. So they're only paying lip service to him at the beginning. This would be those then that are actually beginning to suss him out.
All right, let me just make sense of this then.
This is just another justification. What the whole thing is just to give support to those who believe, because they will say, listen, this is nonsense. And they say, no, this is not nonsense, because all the other guys who don't really know what they're doing, you are far more superior, because the others who mock you and who doubt and do all that, when they are going home, they actually know that they are wrong. They're just stubborn. They just want to fool you. So what you are doing is the right thing. What they are doing is the wrong thing. So don't be fooled by their trickery. They are just hypocrites. So this is meant as a reinforcement for the believers.
Yeah, I understand that. But then these verses seem to be contradicting each other just on a cursory reading.
Yeah, of course they do.
But they know not. And then, but we were mockers. So they do in fact know. But here it says they don't know. And here it says, but they were only mockers, or another interpretation, we were only jesting. Only we are mockers if we take with the corpus. So here he says they don't know, or they didn't know. And here it says, but we are mockers. So I understand your point, Stops. This is all towards the believers to avoid these people. But these verses seem to say, to my ear anyway, or my reading, contradict each other. Either they know what they're saying is foolish or wrong or whatever, or they don't know.
No, what they're saying is that you're the fools, you're the idiots. You think you know something, but you don't really know what you're doing. All you're doing is you're mocking. So you don't really have any cogent facts or anything. You're just like little idiots. You're the fools.
But they do not know. Okay, so this verse says they do not know that they're fools. But here it says, we believe, but when they're alone, they say, we are really with you. We are only jesting.
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah, okay. Seems to me a contradiction, but okay.
No, it is a contradiction. It is a contradiction, but they don't see it like that. The way that it is, okay, the story goes, you have some people who are mocking Islam, mocking Muhammad, mocking everything. So what they're trying to tell people here is, listen, these guys are fools. These guys are idiots. They don't know what they're doing. When in reality, what they're doing, they're getting it wrong. They're saying, well, yes, they do know what they are doing because they're trying to make them look bad, but they don't realize that what they're doing is by saying that they don't know what they are doing, they're actually making an apology for them. Well, if they are mockers, they don't really know what they're doing because they were just mocking out of sheer ignorance, and you can't condemn someone for being ignorant. So they're trying very hard to make the people feel bad, but they're contradicting themselves by doing that because then they're not looking at the logical side of what they're doing here.
Yeah, and again, I guess you could clarify this and make this much more straightforward, and basically say that these people are jesting. Do not associate with them because they will tell you that they believe, but in fact they don't believe, and they know they don't believe, and they will say this behind your back anyway. So stay away from these people. Essentially, you could reword it in some way, more clearly.
And this is chapter 2. This is Baqara. This is the cow. This is an ancient old book. This is like 100, 200 years older than the rest of the Quran.
I assume though that Muslims would challenge you quite vociferously on that.
Of course.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, of course.
All right, that's 14. All right, we need to move on to, it's longer. Let's go on to, so that was 14 to 15. But Allah mocks them and prolongs them in their transgression. They wander blindly. Okay. And he prolongs their progression.
Do you not see the sickness
It's it's just please, if you're a Muslim, come on, come on. Sorry, carry on, Thunderous.
Allah mocks them and prolongs them in their transgressions. Allah, the Almighty God, is mocking people who himself is holding them in their transgression. So he's holding it in a, that to me sounds like he's making them against their will, against their free will, exist for a longer period of time in their ignorance, in his parlance. And while he's actually doing that, he's mocking them. I mean, this is...
It is.
And this is supposed to be the same God that follows along from the Bible.
Well, it's the God that said in chapter 1, in the the second sentence, that I'm the most merciful thing there is. No, you're not.
This is only because they give 99 names, yet there's never an example of him actually manifesting any of those qualities or traits or abilities. And here is an example where all of those 99 names are rendered useless, or they're not names, they're just qualities and conditions and whatnot. But this one surah has totally destroyed them.
But again, if you're a Muslim, come on here. I've given the link to the gentleman that's sent it to me. I'm waiting for him to join us. The link is in there. Please take the link, check your Facebook. I'm just going to stop sharing for
Rob, you know what's going to happen. It's going to be the typical, this is free will. The people want this, and therefore God is giving you the signs. And if you don't want to see the signs, then he's allowed to mock you.
In the MAS Adil Halim version, it says, God is mocking them and allowing them more slack to wander blindly in their insolence. So what that would come across as is like it's a definitive reason, right? Like with insolence, it's like a purposeful concept that has nothing to do with Allah's decision.
Yeah, I mean, that's another interpretation. I mean, here's corpus as well, which is a direct translation, as I understand it. So this is, even if it doesn't make entirely English sense, it's a direct translation. And it talks about prolonging them in their transgression and they wander blindly while mocking them. Okay, so I didn't press the button. I apologize to the Muslim fellow. I put the link into the Facebook Messenger there, and for some reason I didn't hit the enter button. He's going, link, where's the link? And I'm like, I had the link in there, in the chat part, and I hadn't hit the button. So hopefully he'll join us in a moment and he can come
something that's funny to me is just the concept of thinking of God sitting Allah sitting on his throne, just mocking people, a bunch of angels around him. Like, that's a good one, Allah. You really mocked the shit out of that person.
The thing is, the angels don't do that because the angels don't even have free will themselves, so the angels can't even do that. They can only just stand there and watch. I don't know what's going through their minds, because if you don't have free will, then you don't have the ability to comprehend.
Well, no, that would be their that's what they're told to do. Is like, that's the perfect mocking right there, Allah. Great mocking ability. Nobody mocks like you mock. Just all this I guess we call it hero worship, but it would really be like Allah worship of him just sitting around by himself. How is he mocking these people? I would love I wish Saitan or somebody would do a video about that, just the concept of Allah standing up there mocking people by himself surrounded by angels. Like, that's so good. That Allah, you're the best roaster, man. You should be on Comedy Central giving it to these people.
And show me, why have the show if the Muslim response is a foregone conclusion? It is not. This was me mocking the way that apologists come across when they see sentences like that. Okay, so this is me playing the fool here. So if you have anybody who is going to show us that there is a different way of interpreting this, cool. It's just that I've done this for a couple of months, and every time I have this, I get the same identical response. So that is why this is what I'm volunteering. It's my information. It's my experience. If somebody wants to prove me wrong, great, come have it.
Yeah, and I think that's what Wiseau's done, and I think Thunderous. And I want you guys to do that. Give us the responses that you've heard, the most honest, response. Whether you think it's a good response or not. Let's let the viewers know what, when particular verses you have quoted to Muslims, what has been their response. And obviously we will all accurately represent what their response is, whether we agree with it, probably not, but at least if a Muslim's going to come on, he can give us his interpretation, which is great if they're prepared to. And I've now given this gentleman the link, so please join us there. If you are still watching, I have hit the enter button now. You've got a link there. So, but yeah, we'll respond, because obviously we can give our view on it, but typically there will be responses from Muslims, and if they're not going to come on, then I can ask stops, and if I've heard something, I'll respond. But hey, this is what I've heard from Muslims. Then somebody else can comment, and that way, ideally, we want Muslims. But if they're not going to come on, then obviously we'll give whatever we've heard them say.
I just think it's funny, the idea of like Allah sitting up there, and I'm saying right now there is no God, and Allah's like, oh yeah, there is no God. Oh, did I just denounce myself? Like, you know, he's up there trying to mock me personally, and he's using my words, which, you know, if I'm like, oh no, there are multiple gods, and he's like, oh yeah, there's multiple gods. Oh, I just associated with myself. You know, like, it's just a huge, to me, it's hilarious. That's my type of humor.
You've obviously been reading this a lot. Why, sir? All right, let's move on to number 16. Those are the ones who have purchased error in exchange for guidance. So their transaction has brought no profit, nor were they guided.
Okay, I'm so naughty.
Or Yusuf Ali. These are they who have bartered guidance for error, but their traffic is profitless, and they have lost true direction. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, moving on. 17. Their example is that of one who kindled a fire, but when it illuminated what was around them, Allah took away their light and left them in darkness, so they could not see.
Nah.
Their similitude is that of a man who kindled a fire. When it lighted all around him, Allah took away the light and left them in utter darkness, so they could not see.
Great.
So again, this is obviously it's obviously towards non-believers, right? Again, a sense of like, that's an analogy for the mocking, right? They're trying to light a fire, and he's dousing the fire essentially, so they cannot see.
And then, but the problem is that, number one, you're trying to see something, and then he takes away the light, and then they don't see, and then he punishes you for it because you can see.
Yes, he's taken it away, which is why, obviously, you know, in Islam, the concept of judgment and punishment is so utterly incomprehensible and irrational. So yeah,
like the Pharaoh
anyway.
hardens the heart and then punishes him for it. You see this again and again in the Quran. Yeah, there I am. This is me. This is the perfect description of me.
2:18, deaf, dumb, and blind, so they will not return to the right path. Deaf, dumb, and blind, they will not. Well, obviously they won't return if you put a seal on their heart and you've prevented it, and you've prolonged them in their transgressions and mocking them.
I can't see the path. It's dark. They took away my torch. Right?
But again, going back to what you say, Stops, though, this, I don't think, you know, as we read this, it seems abundantly clear that this was meant to almost scare people. It wasn't meant to be reflected on by hopefully somewhat intelligent people 1400 years later. And so it seems to me that this was specifically done at the time to, you know, for a message of the people of the time, to really emotionally challenge them.
But this is what I was saying. He knew his audience. He knew exactly what their mental state is, their emotional state is, their psychology. He knew how to manipulate them.
And I want to welcome in Mo Adam. Mo Adam, good evening. Are you there?
Yes. Do you hear me?
Yes, you're coming through clearly there. Good evening. How are you?
Yeah, fine. Thank you for inviting me, Rob. And good evening to all the panel members. Good evening. Hi.
Good evening. You've heard us doing some of the verses so far.
Yes.
Do you want to respond to some of the things you've heard so far?
Yes, I want to join because I think it's good. It's a good idea to have also a Muslim on the panel.
Of course, we're always asking for Muslims. Yeah.
Yeah. No, they have a different perspective how we see it and how you see it, because we see it differently.
Sure.
As I heard you talk about the verses. So what specific verse you want to talk about?
So really, the message to me anyway that's coming across here in some of the verses we've talked about is the disbelievers and how they depending on the verse you read, either they don't know that they are straying from the path, or they do know and they're saying it behind the believers' backs, and but Allah at the same time is prolonging. In other words, he's assisting or preventing them from actually knowing the truth. That's what, rough translation for me seems to be. Do you want to comment on that? Because if in fact Allah is preventing them, then they don't have a chance of seeing the light.
Okay, yes, I want to comment on that. Okay, first I want to give you an introduction to this surah, Barak, the second surah of the Quran. Allah is describing three types of groups in this verse. The first group is the believers, which skills, how you can say that, which criteria they have, that they are classified as believers. The first one, they believe in the unseen, they believe in one God, they don't associate partners, they believe in Judgment Day, the last day.
Yep. Oh, you've muted yourself or you've disappeared. We don't hear you.
Oh,
there you
so,
go. You're back.
okay. Okay, that's the first group. So Allah is describing the first group is the believers, which criteria they have, which skills they have, which that's the first group. The second group is the hypocrites. That's what he's describing. What are the hypocrites? They say one thing and then behind the Muslims' back, when they are with the Muslim, they say, "Oh, I'm with you. I'm with you. When with you." And then when they are with their hypocrite friends, they say, "No, we don't. We are not with them. We're just mocking them." That's the second group. And the third group is the ones who hide the truth. That means when the truth is clear to them, and the truth is inside, it goes inside their hearts. But they reject it because of pride and arrogance. Because you have to know, because Prophet Muhammad, in the time he lived, there were different tribes, and some tribes are higher in class than other tribes, and some tribes couldn't take it that God chose him from the other tribe, and why he chose him. So they knew he was telling the truth, but they don't want to accept it because they want, because if they accept it, they accept that someone is higher than him, in brackets. So they hide the truth. That's the third category. That's the disbelievers in a sense of they know the truth, but they don't accept it. So it's not talking about you guys. It's not talking about
so
you. You're not involved in those three groups.
Okay, I was just going to ask you that then. So according to you, nowhere in here does it, according to you, refer to people who genuinely don't believe because they believe there's no good reasons. Not like they're hiding. It's not like they're hypocrites. It's not like we care whether we're better or worse than somebody else.
Let me say it this way. Rob, if I talk to you directly, you're not in group one, so you're not a believer. You're not in group two because you're not a hypocrite. You don't say I'm a Muslim and then behind the back you are not a Muslim. And you're not in group three because the truth is not being clear to you. The truth is not settled in your heart. So you are not of these three groups. So you have to see.
I have to push back on that.
Okay.
So I'm using Sahih International that has the footnotes where it's propagating what scholars teach and such like that, the reasoning behind certain verses. And in verse 10, where it says, in their hearts is disease, so Allah has increased their disease. In the footnotes, it says the disease mentioned here includes doubt, hypocrisy, arrogance, and disbelief. Now, one thing kufar means is to cover, right? That's the old Arabic meaning, to cover, to hide. And what it means inside the Quran is to hide belief or truth of the belief. So that's the reason Muslims nowadays, when they call somebody a kufar, they're calling them a disbeliever in general. They're not saying that, they're not using it in the old term of to cover the truth or hiding the truth. They're using it as disbeliever. That's the progression of where this word has come from and where it is now. So when you say that it's not discussing us, I have Sahih International that is teaching Muslims across the world inside of footnotes that it is about doubt, hypocrisy, arrogance, and disbelief. All the things essentially that you said it wasn't.
Can I respond to that?
Go ahead. Yeah.
We're talking about these three kind of groups. These three kind of groups, like I mentioned before. The third group of the disbelievers are the ones who the truth is clear. They know it's the truth, but they don't want to accept it because they have to change their status. They have to change the way they live. They don't want to accept someone from other tribe. Their pride and their arrogance get in the way, so they cover it. So they cover the truth. That's what a kafir is in this category. So if I don't know you personally, but I don't think I don't think you have in your heart I don't think in your heart you will say, oh, this is the truth, but I don't want to accept it because I don't want to accept it. I don't think you're just that kind of person. And when somebody does that and he's persistent in that and consistent in that, then okay, then Allah says, okay, you wanna go that path, or go ahead. Then it shuts down the guidance. There's no guidance for you because it's clear to you that it's the truth, but you don't want to accept it. So okay, Allah, this is the path you want to go. I will let you go that path. So, but this is not talking about you guys.
But my whole point was that that's not what's being propagated through Islam. What you just said is not being propagated through Islam. Now, you can have that personal belief, but I just gave you what is being taught in English by a very popular Qur'an inside of the footnotes, trying to teach Muslims how to believe in a certain verse and how to perceive it. So the dilemma here isn't with you and us, it's with you and the people who are propagating Islam that you don't agree with.
I can guarantee you can ask all scholars. The most of the scholars are unanimous about this, the third group. When because look, if the truth is not settled in your heart, why does Allah doesn't? It doesn't make sense that He will cover you blindly, and you will blindly. It doesn't make sense. Otherwise, nobody will accept Islam. Dawah, it doesn't make sense anymore. It's only for people.
It doesn't. Thank you. Yes.
It doesn't make sense at all, because that means I cannot give dawah, because they did disbelief.
Yeah, I can see your point there, Mo. And I guess back to why we're bringing Thunderous now to say something. I can see your point. If I put myself in your shoes, I could just say to you, well, why so that interpretation by those scholars, it may be popular, but that doesn't mean it's the correct one. And I could bring you scholars that say that that's not the case. So I can see where Mo is coming from, if I may refer to you, Mo, or whatever, however you prefer to be.
Benny.
I can see where he's. Sorry, what's Benny? Benny. I can see where Benny's coming from his perspective, and I know he hasn't said it, but and presumably you would be able to say it, or you kind of have said it, that view is not an original view. So it's a modern view. And I'm not sure we're going to get caught up in that, because now all we're having is a difference of opinion in scholars. I'm not sure it's an argument that can progress other than he's disagreeing and other scholars will disagree with that. But you've got a good point.
Can I quickly respond to you, Rob? Because you made a good point. You made a very good point earlier when you said we have to find out when was this said, to whom. That's the key of the matter, and that's the thing. How you if you want to read the Quran, you have to know the history. You have to know the context. When was it revealed? To which people he addressed?
You've gone mute.
Sorry.
There you go, you're back.
Okay, so you made a good point earlier when you said we have to find out which group he talking about, which history. That's the key. I'm directing you guys, is if you read a verse, just check what the scholars say about when was it revealed, what time, what situation, circumstance, which people he addressed. You cannot take it generally.
I'll do that right now with Q Tafsir of Ibn Kathir, if you want. He's stating exactly what I'm stating, and that's the issue here. If you want to know the truth about it, it says here in Ibn Kathir, in their hearts is a disease, means doubt, and also and then increases their disease, also means doubt. Okay, so doubt would be disbelief. The Quran says that.
Do you have doubt? Do you have doubt in Islam?
Of course I have doubt that it's real. If I don't believe in something, then I have doubts about why it's not true. This is this is a very common, and what you're doing here is you're trying to use a language that
criteria.
from
I'm trying to use the
1400 years
criteria.
ago.
I try to
No,
use the
no.
criteria. You
What
cannot
I
just
just
generalize.
Sir, what I did was just give you Ibn Kathir. I can't screen share right now, but I just gave you what exactly it is. Doubt
Would you
is
agree?
disbelief. Doubt
Okay, but-
is disbelief.
Why? So would you agree that there are other scholars who don't agree with that, and they would take the Benny's side of it? So would you agree that there's
And
a
then what
difference
do
of
we-
opinion?
But here's what we'd have to do, right? We'd have to go a couple of verses forward where it says, we are but reformers, right? And then Allah calls those people hypocrites. He calls those people the ones who were hypocrites. He's using the term munfakun, right? Hypocrite.
Can I give you an example about the reformers?
Now he's using kufar. He's using those who hide the truth.
Yes, that is the crux of the matter. Those who hide the truth. Do you hide the truth? No, you don't hide the truth. So you don't fit this category.
But you're acting like kufar doesn't mean disbelief.
The most of the disbelief that's talked about in the Quran, you can talk all the scholars, they will agree on one thing. The most disbelief that's talked about in the Quran, if you see the word disbelief of kufar, is talk about one group that hides the truth. If the truth is not clear to you, if you if it's not clear to you, you're not fit that category.
Okay, so hang on a moment. Okay.
You're still open for the guidance.
Okay, let's stop there for a moment. Why so? Is there a bigger point to this? Because obviously I'm listening in here, and there's a difference of opinion here. If it were the case that you were correct and Benny was wrong, what difference would that make ultimately? So give us the bigger point here, as opposed to this, whether that was or wasn't. What's the implication of that?
If I'm wrong, then everything that I've been learning about Islam is wrong, right? If he's wrong, everything he's learned about Islam
Why do you
is
say
wrong.
everything though?
And because this is a major contention this is a major point of Islam, is that what is this disease, right?
All right.
And
Okay.
and if he's saying, just real quick, I'll summarize it real quick. If he has a problem with me saying that this disease is based on doubt and disbelief, but I can point to sources, or that is being propagated through various Qur'ans and various scholars across the world, then that's his problem with the scholars and the Quran and the way it's being interpreted and propagated across the world. And that's not a discussion that he should be having with me. It's a discussion that he should be having inside of the Islamic communities, the Ummah.
Can I respond to that quickly?
Okay,
quickly.
Before you do,
Yes.
Benny, I just want to bring Stops in here for a moment. Yes, you can respond to that in a moment.
No, Thunderous was first.
Oh, sorry. Thunderous, do you want to come in on this specific point we're talking about?
Not in this specific point. I wanted to ask a question, part A, part B.
Okay, we'll come back to that. I'll hold that then for a moment. As soon as we just get, I want to move us on from this in a moment. Then I'll come specifically to you to ask that question. Stops, do you want to just give some input on this particular point that's being talked about now?
Yeah, this is total nonsense. Number one, we're talking about a book that was not written for scholars. It was written for people. Number two, we're talking about a book that claims it has made everything very clear, easy to understand, easy to remember. And we're seeing here that it's not. Number three, it says here that it's talking about some people who are not doing what they're supposed to be doing, who were created by this creator to do something completely different than what they're doing. So it's the failure of the creator here. So if we have an incompetent creator who has 80-90% failure rate and still expects to be worshipped, and if it's not, it throws a temper tantrum and then tells us, well, no, you're full of, you're deaf, dumb, and blind. It's all your fault that you're not doing what I'm telling you to do. This is ridiculous. And then for somebody to come here and say, well, it's the scholars. The scholars say they all agree on that. It doesn't matter what the scholars agree on. I don't give a continental fart what the scholars are saying. I care what it says here in the book. And the book says that I'm the asshole. I'm the one who is failing. I'm the one who is hiding the truth. And this is my last point. Who says truth? Who tells me what truth is? Truth is just a word. It's relative. There is no such thing as the truth. And just because I'm covering something which is called the truth does not mean a thing. It is just a word that people are using as the truth. It's
but
total
stop.
nonsense.
What I want you to address, actually, because kind of all of that is the bigger point, which I agree with you on. But the specific point is, Benny is saying that the third group of people does not refer to you, me, Thunderous, etc. Why so saying no, it does.
It does. Of course it does.
Okay, but how do you know?
That's what I just said. This is exactly the point. You can't go and say, well, no, it actually talks about other people who are not you, and it's the others. It's never you. It's always no. That's nonsense. Of course, it talks about those people.
How do you know? Okay, so I'm just going to be sort of a devil's advocate / for a moment. How do you know it does that? Because from my ear anyway, and I'm quite happy to be proven wrong. To my ear, Benny gave 3 different categories, and specifically he said that we don't fall under that category because we don't believe and we're hiding the truth. So when you say no, it is referring to us, can you, out of the verses we've talked to there, which verse specifically refers to us, and how do we know that it refers to us, as opposed to what Benny says, which is it refers to people who do believe, but they're covering up that belief, which is we don't believe, we're not covering it up. So according to Benny, we don't fall under them. You say we do. Which verse is it, and how can we clarify that for me? I'm an independent observer, let's just say. How would you clarify that to me in the verses here or some other way?
Okay. The way that it's propagated is that it's not talking about us because we don't cover the truth.
Correct.
This is the argument. But now, how do we establish, or have we established, what the truth is? No, we're talking about claims. Just because I reject claims which I consider to be false, am I covering the truth? No, I'm not. So this is why the whole concept that he's basing it on, saying that, well, I'm not really doing that. I'm actually a good person. And because I am not one of these people, I'm not a hypocrite. I'm not this, I'm not this. You know, these are like Barnum statements. They're useless. What it is saying here is people who reject my message are the ones whom I'm going to punish. And this is the punishment that is going to be painful, because they are the ones who are lying. They are the ones who are deaf, dumb, and blind, who don't see the path, who don't see where it's going. And this is why I am mocking them, because they are too stupid to see the message. They're too stupid to recognize the signs. This is the point. This is why I'm taking this away, and this is why I'm mocking them, because they are the ones who are stupid.
Okay, so Benny, to you now, Stops, Why So, Thunderous, and myself, although more so the other guys, have read this book multiple times. They do not believe it to be the truth. So you obviously think it is the truth. So essentially, if I understand it, Stops is saying, but actually, no, we are rejecting what you guys claim are the truth. So in fact, this does refer to us. And your statement about it not referring to us is not accurate. Do you want to respond to that?
Yes, I want to respond to that. Look, not to how can I say it? Not to to be lost in big information and everything. I want to keep it on these verses, on these 3 categories. Of course, there's other category we can talk about that you fall under. But
but hang on, before you do that,
yes.
Benny, let's not, because the point of discussion here is that there isn't actually a 4th category according to Stops and Why So, etc., because the truth is out there. And in fact, if you look at it from a different perspective, Stops, myself, etc., we are rejecting this truth because the truth is here in front of us. These verses are the truth, and we are rejecting the truth. So again, we can take a perspective that we are in fact rejecting this truth. We just don't believe it to be the truth. You know it, or you claim to know it's the truth. So from that perspective, from a Muslim perspective, here's the truth, and we are rejecting it knowingly. It's not like we're brain dead or whatever the case is. We are knowingly rejecting what we are reading here.
Okay, let me follow me. Maybe I'll go in deep, but look, if if signs come to you and it makes sense and it's clear and you feel it outside and inside from, yeah, this is the truth. This is the truth.
No, it doesn't work like that.
And then you reject it because you don't want to follow authority. You don't want to change your life. You don't want to do. You want to rather follow your desires and everything. Then you reject because of your pride and your arrogance. Then and you being persistent and stubborn in that consistently, even if science comes to you and it's clear to you, then Allah says, okay, go ahead. You want to go that path? I will. Okay, go ahead. Then go that path.
Yeah, you're just repeating stuff.
But if it's not really clear to you, the signs are not really clear to you. You don't know if it's the truth or not, and you're just seeking and seeking. You have a open way to guidance. Your heart is not sealed.
Okay, Benny.
You are not blind.
Okay, but at this point, I think all of us in the chat here, it's not like we don't think this is the truth. We do not believe this to be the truth. So we do then, in that sense, fall under category 3. We're reading this. We do not believe it's not. And again, I think making the analogy, as Stops sort of jumped in there, making the analogy with science is not a good one. If science demonstrates something with an overwhelming degree of probability to be true, we will accept it, whether we like it or not. Here, in this case, we're looking at this and we're going, we don't accept this. It's not like we are not sure about it or umming and ahhing. We don't accept this. So if we use that point, I don't think we're going to get agreement here. I think you're bringing up a fourth category that, you could bring up, but I think there's certainly a valid perspective that says, no, this is the truth and we are rejecting this truth. We don't claim it to be the truth, obviously, because otherwise we would accept it.
Okay. Let me ask you something, then you follow me. At this moment, Rob, do you feel it inside that Islam is the truth?
Okay, let me answer that. I don't
then
think
sure. Follow me.
Do you feel inside? You, yes. No, I don't feel it because I don't use feelings to judge.
Then you're not on the category of what is talking about in these verses. This is talking about people who are having inside, they know it's the truth. So if you feel it inside, it's the truth, okay, and you reject it because of pride and arrogance, then you're not falling in this category. Allah will not seal your heart.
Show us where it says this. Where does it say this?
The whole point is, I'm sorry, but the whole point here is you shouldn't be having this debate with us. You should be having the debate with the people who are printing out the tafsirs or who are printing out the Qur'ans, the people who are putting in the footnotes that are Muslim and obviously have gone through proper channels of checking with scholars and whatnot to be able to propagate this inside of Islam. That's the whole issue, because what we can do is we can look up, and I gave a tafsir, right? One of the most authentic tafsirs that scholars follow. And it's in the group chat, and I can put in another one from Ibn Kathir, which is saying exactly what I'm saying, but what you're not saying. Okay, so the discussion here shouldn't be with us. It should be with your own community. And then you decide how and when did it become that Muslims, scholars and such, ordinary people started propagating these ideas that you go against. And also, I have to get off here, y'all. I'm sorry I got to go to work, but it's been fun. I'll talk to y'all here later.
All righty. Thank you so much.
That's my side.
Okay, Benny. So when you ask me, do I feel it? I don't evaluate claims like this and the book on feeling. I go with rational reasoning. So to feel it on your heart, I think is an erroneous methodology for uncovering truth about propositions like that. This is a claim in a book. It's not something I can feel. And I think anybody who claims that, like there was the white guy I pointed out earlier he said, oh, I had a feeling about this. The moment somebody has a feeling, they're not using their critical thinking. And if that's the methodology that you might want to appeal to, or he did, I don't think that's a reliable methodology. Because if you get a feeling, how do you establish if that feeling is potentially true? You don't use another feeling. You have to use rationality. So the feeling part for me, we can ignore for the most part. So that's not a methodology I would use. So when you say, do I feel it? No, I don't feel it. I'll read it and then I'll make to the best of my ability, a rational or logical or come to a rational, logical conclusion.
What I mean is, sorry, maybe I explained it wrongly. What I mean is that that you know that this is the truth, but
No, but I can't.
you
But that's
cover,
not possible, though.
Can I ask,
but
can I ask a question?
you
Okay, but
cover it.
yeah, I want to bring Thunderous in because he has been waiting. I can't possibly know this to be the truth and cover it. We can't. I mean, Stops, myself, and Thunderous can tell you that's not the case. There may be people out there that are doing this, but
Yes.
we aren't. But we
Yes.
are not. We are not doing that. But you claiming this
Okay.
is the truth.
Okay,
Okay.
then you're not on this category. Then look, if you know it's the truth and you don't accept it, then
can
it's
we
okay.
leave
Then
the
go ahead.
category thing? Can we leave the category thing? I'd like to ask you something, Mo Adam or Adam Mo, whatever it is.
Benny. Benny.
Benny, thank you for joining us tonight. When we consider the surah that we're talking about now, how far along was Muhammad in his prophethood when he got this revelation from Allah?
This revelation came, if I'm not mistaken, in Mecca.
Yeah.
Mecca, when
How long was
after
was he a prophet for 5 years, 10 years, 2 years? How long was he a prophet before he got this?
I don't. I have to research it, but if I'm not mistaken, he was involved with the Quraysh. That was the people of Mecca, the Quraysh, who used to worship idols and do a lot of crazy things. So he at first he just talked to them, concealed them, advised them, and everything.
I'm not
After
asking
many
that.
years.
I'm not asking that question.
Yes,
How
yes.
many years was he a prophet before this surah or revelation came to him? How many years do you think? Give me an estimation.
I think at least 4 years. I think. I don't know. I
Okay,
cannot say.
so he was a prophet. Said earlier on, he came with signs, clear signs. What were the signs that Muhammad came with for these people? That was so they knew it was the truth. I mean, what signs did he have?
Okay, but before he answers that, Thunderous, where's that in that? Thunderous, just a question for you. Where is that in the? I don't want us to jump ahead in the Quran. Where is this in the information we've been going through here? Which verse are you referring to?
No, but Benny said that Muhammad had signs. He had clear signs. It's not in the text that we're discussing. So I'm trying to understand, where does Benny get the clear signs from, and what were those clear signs that those people could see these signs, see that it was the truth.
You're breaking up a bit there. You might have to reconnect or make a connection again. Thunderous, you're breaking up there. No, I'm not hearing you. You're dropping every second word now. In the beginning, you were dropping one word in a sentence. Now you're dropping a lot more.
Okay, I'll rejoin.
Yeah, just rejoin. I think that might take us off on a tangent. About the signs. I think Benny as well. Can I ask you, Benny, try to be concise on the questions and the thing we're asking you, because if you start talking about history and science, then some of the panelists are likely to start asking about that, and then that takes us off on a side tangent. So let's try as best. And I know we're asking you to try and focus specifically on the claim or the questions we're talking about. Because if you elaborate too much, then people will go off on a tangent. Go ahead, Stops.
Can I just ask,
I agree.
where do you get 3 categories? I only see 2 categories, and you're saying there are 3 categories. You are okay. The way that I see it is either you believe or you don't believe, and then what you are saying is, well, there are those who don't believe, but they are hypocrites. That's not a third category. That's just, it's the same thing. It just has an additional quality to it, but it's not an additional category. So we're only talking about 2 categories of people here: those who believe and those who don't believe. The ones who believe, they get the reward. Those who don't believe get the punishment. Where do you see a third one?
Okay. From Islamic perspective, the hypocrites are much worse than the disbelievers, because the disbelievers, they say, oh, we don't believe. Okay, we reject. But the hypocrites are the most dangerous, because they come in your group and they say, we belong to you, but they're trying to destroy you in your group. It's like a friend. You
got a bit soft. You got a bit soft there. Try again.
The hypocrites are the worst, because
soft again.
Do you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay.
You're back now.
Let me explain. the hypocrites are the worst, is worse than the disbelievers, because
we understand
disbelievers,
that.
and
Great. We
because
understand that.
they are more dangerous, because they can destroy.
Great.
They can,
But that's not the point. The point that I'm trying to make is either you believe or you don't believe. The hypocrites don't believe.
So what Stops is saying is there's two. Where do you in the text get the third category? I know you're trying to explain three categories, but where specifically in the text do you come up with a third category? Is that what you're kind of asking?
Yeah.
if you
No, you've gone very soft again, Benny.
do you hear me now? Do you hear me?
Yeah, try and stick there. I don't know if you've got a loose connection.
Contact.
Yeah.
Okay. Look, if I'm not mistaken, the verse begins with starting with the, if I'm not mistaken, with the believers. So the category of the believers. That's the first category, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yes.
And then the second category, if I'm not mistaken, is talk about the hypocrites, right?
Are the hypocrites believers or non-believers?
You can say non-believers, but from an Islamic perspective, we separate them because they are worse than non-believers, because they, you have to, we label, it's just a label. You're right. End of the day, is a disbeliever. I agree with you, but you have to give it a label so you can recognize the danger of it, because a hypocrite is more dangerous than a disbeliever, because he can destroy
that's cool,
you.
But we still have only two categories, and I am part of the second category because I'm a non-believer.
Yeah, but Stops, he's splitting up that category, or he's suggesting that Islam split that category.
The Quran doesn't do that.
Yes, it does. If you follow the verses, it will start with believers, and then Allah will talks about people who mocking. So they say we believe, and then when they are with their hypocrite friends, evil ones, they say, "Oh, we're not with them. We're just mocking." And then the third category is
Benny, this is nonsense. Come on, you're just using labels. Just because somebody is using a word does not mean you need to open up a new category just because you have a new label. It's part and parcel of it. Okay, there is no difference here. You can't just go and say, okay, you are not part of this, so you don't need to argue this, you don't need to read this, you don't need to be angry with this because it doesn't even affect you. That's not the point. Definitely not.
No. It's just a perspective of, look, in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, he had many enemies. So it was very important.
Why did he have enemies?
Stops, that's a separate point.
But you're going deeper and deeper. You're going off on a totally different area, which is illogical. This is nonsensical what you are doing, because you're saying the Prophet had many enemies. Why would God create a prophet and create many enemies for that prophet? If he has a message that is so clear, that is so wonderful, and everybody should adhere to this and follow the rules, you can't go and say, well, there were many enemies and that's why we had to defend ourselves. It's illogical. It doesn't make sense. And this is not the point we're going here. We are looking at the Quran. We're looking at chapter 2. We're looking at the sentences, I don't know, 8 to 14 or something. And that is all we're talking about. And what you are doing now is you're bringing in, I don't know, the monkeys and everything. It doesn't work like that. This is what we're saying. You said, well, you don't need to worry about this because you are not in these categories, but you don't have anything to substantiate that with. And so there's what we brought you in here to bring a balanced perspective to this, to show us if there is any way that you can make some sense of this, because this is a really idiotic set of sentence here which don't make sense. And now you are coming in here and saying, well, let's not talk about the sentences, let's talk about something completely else. So, this doesn't that's why it's so frustrating for me to have a Muslim here who I'd actually want to explain the sentences and not now come and increase the number of categories and think that this is in any way changing something or making it better. It is not.
All right, I think let me put it this way. Let's move on. Weiser brought this up originally, and I think we've gone down this route here. There's not going to be agreement here. I can see how Benny says, okay, there's two categories under the non-believer. Stops you just saying there's one category. If you could point to a verse that said something about the two categories, but it would still fall under non-believers anyway. But I'm not sure that we're going to progress any further with this. Maybe what we need to do now going forward is read the verse, see what we can get from each verse, because I'm not sure we're going to get any further by this. You're going to claim there's 3 stops. Are going to say it's nonsensical. It's not saying that. I'm not sure, unless you could say, but stops and rob in Surah 2 verse 15, it specifically mentions those people, and so on. And then, but even then, I'm not sure what the point would be specifically. I understand you saying, hey, for us as Muslims, it differentiates because the hypocrites are worse than disbelievers. I understand you saying that, but I'm not sure what else we can do here then, unless you've got a reason why this is somehow super important.
I think I agree with you, Rob. I see it differently, and most of the Muslims, if you ask, they see it also differently. I can understand what Stop says, that disbeliever and hypocrite is a disbeliever. I can understand his point of view, but to us, from an Islamic perspective, we have to give it. We have to distinguish between a disbeliever and a hypocrite, because especially in the time of the Prophet, he had many enemies and many wars. So in his own group, he had many hypocrites. That's why it was labeled.
Is it still applicable today, though? Is it still applicable to use this today?
Not the way it was used in that time, because in that time it was a situation of emergency, because for example, the Romans were coming to attack the Muslims, so it was a state of emergency. So Muhammad said, "Oh, now is a state of emergency. They coming to attack us. We have to prepare." And if you refuse to go ahead and defend yourself and go into war, you are among the hypocrites, and you will be seen as treason, and you'll be being killed. So it's a state of emergency. Now in this time, we are not in a state of emergency. We are not in a state of war, but we're lives. So it's not different.
So would it then be the case that what Stops is saying is more applicable today, that even if we accepted what you said, today it's more applicable that you've got believers and you've got non-believers, and the differentiation is not important today?
Yes.
Okay, you've gone a bit soft again. Okay, cool.
Sorry, I can agree that. But we have now a different kind of hypocrisy. In that time, it was more in an emergency hypocrisy, when there was a state of war. So it was more.
You've gone again. Can you
sorry.
try and fix your loose connection there?
I want to say one thing, and then we can move on. In that time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, it was a state of emergency, so the hypocrisy was more important to differentiate. But in this time, it's more hypocrisy.
You've gone soft again.
So okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah, try and hold on to it like that so that it doesn't move, because you keep dropping out.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, yes? Go ahead. Yeah, you're clear.
Okay. The final point. Just coming back. In the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, it was a time of emergency.
Yeah,
so
I got that.
So it was more important to distinguish, to be.
Yeah, I got that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But now in this time, we are not in a state of war. We're not so it's more of saying, breaking promises is seen as hypocrisy. Telling many lies is seen hypocrisy. Saying things what you don't do is seen hypocrisy. That's in this time. It's
okay.
Not really.
All right. Thunderous, you're back. It's probably going to take us off on a bit of a tangent, but if you still want to ask that question for some reason, because he went off, I have asked Bernie to try and answer the question and keep it concise so he doesn't bring up other claims that we then latch onto and it takes us off. But if you want to finish off that other one that you sort of started, then go ahead.
Thank you. So far, Benny, you've said that this surah was revealed when Muhammad was 5 years into his prophethood. You also said earlier on that he had given them signs. I would like to ask you, what signs had he given the people around him? What signs did Muhammad use?
I can say it, but I don't think you will really understand. You have to know the whole background. But okay, I can give you some sentence, and I don't think it's really. I don't think you will really be convinced. But If you look into it, then you understand what I mean. But in the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the Arabs had only what they had. In that time they didn't had oil. So what they had is poetry and speech, words. In the time, the words were very powerful. If you can speak a good word, if you convince people, it's very powerful in that time. And the Prophet ﷺ was known in his community that he didn't speak well. He didn't know poetry. His word vocabulary was very weak. They knew him for 40 years in that time. They knew that this one was not learned. And suddenly, when he received the revelation, suddenly he comes with powerful words, powerful speech, different kind of concepts in the Arabic language that they never heard of, like
so they're not really science. He basically just spoke.
That's what I mean. That's what I mean. It's very deep.
No,
you have to.
Please. Okay, well, let's move.
Okay.
Let's
move on.
I've asked my question. I think we're all going to know what would happen if I got into that one. So let's just move on.
You're dropping a little bit there, Thunderous.
Let's just move on. We know what's going to happen if I stay around this area. Let's just move on.
Okay, so Benny, what I'm going to do now is continue on. I think, let me just share the screen here, if you can see it.
Rob, I just want to clarify one thing. There was no emergency, okay? The Romans were not on their way to Mecca. There is nothing like that.
All right, if you want to have that discussion, go ahead. Benny, you said that...
No, I don't want to discuss this. This is a fact, okay? This is not, there was no emergency. There was nothing. Muhammad was the one who caused the emergency in Mecca. This is why they wanted to kill him. This is why he ran away to Medina. So has nothing to do with the Romans or anything like that.
Can I quickly respond to that? Just quickly.
No, there's nothing. This is a fact, okay? You can't, there's no point in discussing this.
But stops. If we're going to have them on, then I know you believe it's a fact. Well, let him say it. Otherwise, we could. I'm not sure what the point is of having him on. If you're just going to say everything is a fact and he can't respond, I mean.
Okay. Just quickly. Otherwise, I agree with you. We're going on a tangent, and but just quickly on that point, you can search it also in history. You can check it out. When he conquered Mecca. And Muhammad, Prophet ﷺ and his followers conquered Mecca. They sent letters to the Romans. So he sent an ambassador to the Roman with declaring, to join him and to accept Islam. But the Roman king at that time was very offended about that. So he killed the ambassador. When you kill an ambassador, it means an act of war. So the Romans were very offended, so they killed the ambassador. So the Muslims had to prepare for a war against the Romans, a big empire, and that was a very.
They wrote. So Muhammad had a letter written. Muhammad had a letter written to have Allah's words written down. He couldn't be bothered to have Allah's words written down, but he had a letter written for him.
No, somebody else wrote the letter for him.
Somebody else wrote it, but somebody else did not write the Quran. And somebody else didn't write the Quran, but they wrote a letter on Muhammad's behalf because he was illiterate.
We're going on a tangent.
You're the one that brought the Romans and the letter into it.
Just a quick
I'm
reply,
asking a simple question. You went on this. Now let's stick with this then. Muhammad had a letter written going to the Romans. He sent an envoy there. But he didn't think that the most important person in the universe is Allah. And he didn't think or have the presence of mind to have Allah's words written down, to have it recorded. But he had a letter written for him on his behalf. So there were clearly people who could read and write in Saudi Arabia at the time that Muhammad was a prophet. He'd already, by your estimation, he'd already been a prophet 5 years. And in 5 years, and we don't know how many surahs had been revealed by then, he'd never once asked any of his scribes to write down the words of Allah, the very words that are in heaven next to Allah and that have been there since time immemorial. And he never once had the presence of mind to have those words written down. Please explain that.
That was not the point. That was not the point.
Okay, let's move on because he doesn't know.
Yes. Okay, no problem.
The question.
No
He
problem.
doesn't know the answer. Let's move on.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think that's a bit of a side tangent. Stops, you were going to respond and say, presumably that didn't happen at that time, or you agree that did happen after he conquered Mecca, or what were you going to say there? From a historical
I'm going to
point of view?
leave this. No, it doesn't matter.
Oh, okay. All right. Where are we?
Romans coming to Mecca.
Yeah, no. Okay, we're gonna move on from that. I think Stops' original point was that Muhammad was causing all sorts of trouble in Mecca, and he was chased out of Mecca because he was, misbehaving himself per se, or making everybody upset. Eventually, they got. I think you'd agree with that, Benny. You might phrase it differently, but at some point, the Muhammad was annoying everybody in Mecca, and they got tired of this, and they chased him out. And then, obviously, he came back with an army, etc., etc.
Can I respond quickly to that?
Sure.
Look, okay, I'll give you.
Here we go.
Oh, come on.
Okay, can I respond? You can disagree. It's no problem. No problem. I just give information, and then you can verify it and check.
You're not giving information. You're just making claims. We reject the claims, and then we have the next one. It doesn't make sense.
No problem. But it's
Benny,
good that we can disagree. It's good that we can disagree. It's no problem.
Benny, with respect, you have the right to have an opinion, but you don't have the right to make up your own facts and rewrite history in your own image.
No problem. No problem. If you think so, no problem.
We
Okay, so no problem. I don't mind. I don't mind. We can disagree. It's no problem. We can discuss. It's a balanced view. We can discuss.
It's
good.
It's balanced. It's not, Benny. It's not. It's not a balance when you're making things up and lying. That's not a balanced view. That's deception.
Okay. Let me talk about Mecca. Let me talk about Mecca. Look, Mecca. You can check it out in its history. Mecca was
history. There was existed.
All right.
Until after Muhammad died.
Thunderous, let's stop here for a moment. Let me just bring in something here. Stops and Thunderous, let me know here. We brought him on for a different perspective. He's got a view. You guys think he's completely wrong, and he's talking complete nonsense. He thinks we're presumably wrong. Somehow we can get that information. But I think saying that to him, I'm not sure what value that is. If we shouldn't have a Muslim on, great. If you guys think we should, what are the criteria? Because I see both of you going, he's talking complete nonsense. You reject it out of hand, which is fine. But I'm not sure what the point of having him on is. So maybe between you guys, share with me, because I'm confused here, to be honest. If we're having him on and we want to hear what he's got to say and we're going to reject it out of hand immediately, fine. But what's the point of having him on then? Go ahead.
No, it's very easy. If there's a Muslim who comes on here when we're talking about the Quran, this is brilliant. To have somebody who can explain the individual sentences to us. But then to go off and say, well, the Romans are coming, there's an emergency, there's different categories, there's three different groups here. No, this is going completely in the wrong direction, because we are focusing on the contents of the Quran. And we're not talking about history. We're not talking about whatever it is that we were talking about at the moment. This is what I think is the value of having a Muslim here, to give us the Islamic perspective or the Muslim understanding of a particular sentence in the Quran. That is what we're talking about. We're not talking about politics and stuff.
Okay, let's do that. Let's do that.
And if you consider what Why So Religious said earlier on, that with the greatest of respect to Benny, he's making claims that 99.9% of Muslims in the world are their teachers or imams and scholars for dollars and that, and in Islamic literature and history, he's not in agreement with.
But he's saying the scholars do agree with him.
But he's saying no, but that's not what was said earlier on.
This is bullshit. There's no such thing as scholars agree with somebody. All the scholars, I don't know a single topic where every single scholar will agree with everything. That does not exist. You will always find a scholar that will have a different opinion on something.
Yeah, but presumably we're talking about the majority of scholars, right? Not that we necessarily accept that as being true, but what I'm saying is that,
exactly.
Yeah. But I mean, yes, you can always find somebody that's going to disagree, sure. But it's like, in a sense, science, if the majority of scientists, although, that analogy doesn't hold necessarily because they have overwhelming evidence, presumably the Muslim will say, hey, if the overwhelming number of scholars say this, they've got, quote, evidence for their view. Obviously, that's questionable, but that's the line that they would presumably take. So if the majority of scholars say X, then Muslims are, I suppose, feeling justified to believe what the majority of the scholars say. Would you guys agree with that if we put ourselves in their position?
Absolutely. But the majority of scholars will agree that there's a God.
Well, I think every scholar will agree there's a God. I'm not sure there's any
This is the problem. This is the problem. Other than that, they don't agree on anything. They don't even know when Muhammad was born. They don't know any. They don't agree on anything that I know of.
All right. Well, let's not go there then. Because you specifically said let's ask Benny to refer to verses, but I guess the case is when he's talking about a verse, he's going to have to say something that's not just about the verse. And okay, we can, Benny, if we can. We'll try and remind you when we go through the verses to try and keep it concise to the verse and not give us a history, bearing in mind that a couple of the guys here have got quite a well-known and they've looked through history quite a bit, or a version that you may reject. So let's try and keep it to the verses if we can. So try not to add extra bits, because people are likely to jump onto the extra bits instead of sticking with the verse. Is that, is that cool?
I'll try my best to keep it short and clear.
Thank you.
Cool. Okay, cool. All right, so let me share the screen again now, and we're going to carry on from here then. So let's just bring this up now, present everybody. So the last one I think we did was 2:16. These are the ones who have bartered guidance for error, but their traffic is profitless and they have lost true direction. And I think 17 is the 17 we've done as well. Their similitude is that of a man who kindled. Okay, so this is more about how, again, you've tried to light a fire, but Allah has taken away the fire and left them in darkness. That was the last one. Oh, this was the last one, I think, actually. Deaf, dumb, blind, so they will not return. Do you want to comment briefly on those two verses there? In your view, what is that referring to? Benny, are you there?
Oh, you talking to me? You talking to me?
Yeah.
Do you see the screen? Do you see the sentences on the screen?
Yeah. I see the sentences.
2:17 and 2:18.
Yes, the example of the yes. This is just talking about the ones who exchange belief with disbelief, and they have they know it's the truth, but they reject it. It's a kuffar. This was a kuffar. Kuffar is someone who buries the seed. It's a farmer. It's coming. That's the real explanation of a kuffar. A farmer who plants the seed and buries it up and covers it up. So this is talking about people who have the truth, but they cover it up. They don't want to show the truth. So deaf and blind, they will. And Allah says, okay. You don't want to follow the truth. You want to cover it up. Okay, I'll let you go on that path and deaf and blind.
Yeah, but it seems to be suggesting here that Allah takes away the light and leaves them in utter darkness. So if they are disbelieving, it seems that Allah gives them a helping hand to cement that disbelief even more, as opposed to giving them the option to maybe rekindle a belief. That's what it seems to suggest. Is that
this talking about people who are persistent and consistent? It's not because of 1 day or 2 days or 3 days. This kind of people who are years stubborn.
Doesn't say arrogant.
It doesn't say that, but that's the view of. You can ask all Muslims and also the scholars, and the way it's been explained. This talking about people who are consistent. It's not because 1 day you disbelieve.
Okay, but even if they were, okay, let me be charitable and suggest, okay, even if they were being persistent, is it possible that a persistent person could actually at some point have an experience and come back to belief? That's possible, right? People have had that experience. That's happened in life, has it?
Okay, I will give you something just straightforward. Look, if you live in the time of the prophets, and the prophets come to you with clear signs and clear truth, and you know it's the truth, and you reject it, that means it's done. No, there's no chance for you. But if you live in a time where there are no prophets, like now, like now we living in a time where there are no prophets, and somebody comes to you, just a Muslim coming to you and giving you the message, you say, no, I reject it. Isn't that, it's good, it's fine, you have all the plenty years to plenty of chances. But if this is talking about in the time of the prophet came to them with clear proofs and signs, and they rejected. That means you are ungrateful, because you're giving the
Okay,
VIP,
I understand.
you're
So
giving
you
the VIP ticket to live in the
Yes.
time of a
So
prophet.
you're suggesting that these verses specifically only refer to the people at Muhammad's time that met him and that, quote unquote, would have seen that somehow he would have demonstrated this undeniable truth, which he can't do today. So it was more for the people who actually interacted with him and still rejected, quote unquote, the truth that he somehow demonstrated. Is that what you're saying, right?
Yes, that's the way of this is the way of Allah, who deals with people. Look at, for example, at Noah. Noah came to
Okay,
them
yeah,
with
let's
clear
not go into
proofs,
that, Benny.
and
Let's
he
not, let's
destroyed
go
them.
sidetracked.
Okay.
I understand what you say. Okay. Thunderous or Stops, do you want to respond to that claim that these verses were for those people because they had potentially a chance to really know the truth, and today it's less so because we don't have a prophet?
Well, the starters, Muhammad had no signs. I mean, I'm not going to digress, but previous prophets had monumental signs, raising the dead, feeding 5,000 people. There were clear demonstrative signs that were beyond the realms of human being capability. Muhammad didn't come with anything to make them think. He didn't raise the dead, he didn't feed 5,000, he did nothing miraculous. All we're getting is this guy had this amazing speech. All he basically did was produce some words of from his vocal cords. But he's saying
he split the moon. That's a pretty big miracle.
Yeah, but no, we don't know when, because we don't know. We're in this, according to Benny, this is 5 years into Muhammad's prophethood when this surah is being revealed. So we don't know when the moon splitting is taking place. Has it already taken place, or is the moon splitting yet to come? If it had already taken place, then that raises alarming questions. If it's yet to come, that raises alarming questions, and you don't want to get sidetracked. Right. So coming back,
just to clarify, I don't know really when this verse. So please don't put me on this. I don't really know. So I have to research it.
So I'm going with 5 years.
I think.
Okay, well let's stick with 5 years, right? Because it's better than not having any idea at all. Then you said that they had a prophet 1400 years ago, but we don't have a prophet now. But if this is the word of Allah, that the word that is in heaven, that has been in heaven alongside Allah for time immemorial, and is now being revealed on earth, and we have the Quran today. The Quran is the greatest prophet of all. The Quran is, in Islamic parlance, will be 1,000,000 times greater than Muhammad. It is the very words of Allah.
My point is,
if anybody rejects the Quran, they are rejecting Allah directly.
My point is,
so today people are worse today if they reject the Quran than they were in the 1400 years ago.
Why?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I will tell you why. My point is, the people that lived in the time of the prophets is not comparable with the time of now. Is not comparable. No. In the time of the prophets is more sensible. Is more. The truth is more clearer. So if you reject it, then you will get destroyed. The people of Noah get destroyed. The people of Pharaoh got destroyed. Many people got destroyed because the prophets were in their time. Now you cannot compare this time with the prophet's time. No, you cannot. It's absolutely not true.
We can, because they didn't have the word of Allah, but we've got the word of Allah today. They never had the word of Allah then, Benny.
They had the messengers among them. That's more clearer.
Noah didn't have a book. Noah didn't have the words of Allah. He was just a preacher of righteousness. So maybe you'd want to look at your history a little bit more. But coming back to today, the word of Allah is in the Quran, the very words of Allah, the final testament of the God of allegedly the Abrahamic religions. Clearly not, but we'll go along with the narrative.
Okay. But
so how on earth can people today be in a better position than what they were 1400 years ago with Allah, because that means that the Quran is useless today. It serves no purpose, because if all you've got to do is to survive the judgment of Allah, is remain in ignorance. In fact, it is better for Allah to have never revealed the Quran, because that would be more people will be in ignorance, and more people would benefit from his so-called mercy than if he have. What was it? Because the Quran serves no purpose then.
No, you misunderstood my point.
I've understood your point. You've just misunderstood
my point was living in the time of the prophet is not comparable with living in a time without a prophet.
Yeah, sure. I understand that.
That's not comparable. You cannot compare those two, because if you live in the time of the prophet, the truth is more clearer. The signs
How
are
is
more
it clearer?
clear.
You've not made clearer to us as to why was it more clearer in Muhammad's day than it is today. We both have the words of Allah. He had it linguistic form, we have it in physical form in a book. So how did they have it better than we have it now?
Because yeah, it's deep, because they, for example, I'll give you some examples, then you will I will give you some direction. They used to call him a magician, a sorcerer,
yeah,
a madman, if you call someone a magician, that means something. You cannot, you're not just gonna call someone a magician for nothing. You know what I mean? It's deep. You have to. I don't want to go on that tangent, but many people called him a magician. It means he had something that was beyond.
They also called him a madman. So that must mean something. He was also possessed by the Satan during the satanic verses. That must mean something.
Do you know what
you're mentioning?
Yes.
Not relevant to the discussion, Benny. Please.
But you know what people said? Especially the haters in that time of problem. They said, "Don't listen to him, because he will influence you. He will give you a magic spell that you will accept Islam." That's how they revealed him. So it means something. It means something.
Okay, if I summarize this here, Thunderous believes that if we have the Quran today, that's better than the people who were around and met Allah. Met Muhammad. You, Benny, are saying no. In fact, it's better. People at the time would have been better because they met the live person. Presumably, they could have asked him questions. They could have interacted with him in some way, which we can't do today. So all we have is the Quran. But Thunderous's point is, hey, we've got the entire Quran. And if that is the infallible word of God, which is a complete and concise and error-free guide for all human beings, then we should be at least in the same position, if not better. I will go with charitably saying we're at least in the same position. But no, you're saying it was better then.
Okay, follow me. If you were in the time of the prophets, for example, just to make a point that you will understand. If you for a time, in the time of the prophet of Moses, and Moses came to you with a staff, and he says, you know, I'm a prophet, I'm a messenger of God, accept me, follow me, obey me. And you say to him, okay, prove it. And then suddenly he throws the staff, and the staff becomes a snake. That's a clear sign. That's a clear sign for you. And then you say, no, I reject you. Then it's done. It's over, because you have a big sign.
Okay, but I don't think using Moses is a good example, because what comparable miracle did Muhammad do, like the staff? What comparable miracle that would have convinced everybody that was around him?
I know it's for us, we can say the speech, the words were very powerful.
Okay, good.
That he called them a magician. The magicians, they called him a magician. Don't listen to him. He will trick you.
Okay, cool. So I don't think it's comparable to use Moses, who presumably had an actual miracle that was separate from the words. But this gets back to Thunderous's point, which is, if it was the words that were miraculous and they were God's words and he was simply a conduit, then those words are still just as applicable today as they were then. So in fact, what would be the advantage of being around in Muhammad's time if it was just the words that were miraculous, and those words are perfectly preserved in the Quran today? So essentially what you read in the book is exactly what Muhammad said. So what advantage would there be other than that? Now you would have to preserve, now you have to give us something other than the words.
Okay,
the words are still the words.
Okay, I will give you something. If you lived, look, there were people who lived 40 years with Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So they knew how he spoke. They knew he has a weak vocabulary, a weak, his speech was very weak. And then suddenly the next day he comes with powerful words. And then they say, hey, this is not you. This is not your speech. This is not your speech. Because you will recognize, for example, if you have a best friend, you know your best friend, how he speaks, how he, you will know it, how he speaks. And then suddenly he changes his whole speech and it's very powerful. It comes with different concepts.
Okay.
You will say, hey, there's something different about you. No, you're not the same. That's the advantage that people have.
Yeah, but I understand that, Benny, but Muslims say that today. They say he was a special guy. He wasn't a special guy until he was 40 and he heard voices in a cave, and he's a special guy. So again, to my ear, you're not saying anything different other than they had the personal experience. But that doesn't seem to be, from a factual point of view, anything different. Certainly not from Allah's point of view. It seems to me that whether you were with him
you have to understand
or whether you were today,
Yes.
whatever happened, and presumably you accept hadiths, which is his sayings, so all the important ones were captured there anyway. So we actually have everything. What benefit would there have been for Muhammad living today if we've got the hadiths and we've got the perfectly preserved Quran? What benefit would there be for a believer today, in that day, as opposed to today? Because you haven't given me anything. You've told me, okay, they suddenly saw him different. Well, we know that, if we follow your narrative, that was the case today. So what's the difference? What tangible difference is there that you can give me other than what I've just mentioned?
Okay, I understand where you're going. How can I say that? I think it's, how can I say that? If you have it's very hard to explain because you have to.
Yeah, it doesn't seem to me there can be something. I mean, I don't want to interrupt you. The only thing that you could point to is if there was some sort of tangible miracle, like, for example, him being resurrected or him doing some miracle that everybody around him saw and they went, that's miraculous. Because obviously if we hear about it in a book, that's one thing. But if we witness a miraculous event, that's totally separate. But you don't appear to suggest that there was anything like that convinced everybody. If there was some sort of miracle, it again, you can produce one, but it doesn't sound like there was something that shook the Arabs at that time. They went, holy crap, this was like the moon splitting. If everybody had seen that and that was attributed to Muhammad in some way, I don't know how you could quite do that unless he had all the people around him. He suddenly prayed, and at that moment, at the moment he finished praying, the moon split. Then maybe there was a correlation. People go, wow, this was amazing. He just did this and it split and I was there and everybody around them saw it. That would be something that you could say, okay, at that time, that would have been somewhat convinced for those people that we don't have today.
Okay, look, from Allah's perspective, words are the most powerful tool a human being can have. Words, not a weapon, not words. From Allah's perspective, if you have a powerful word, a powerful speech, you can motivate people, you can change people, you can change the whole society just by only expressing words. And that's the miracle of Muhammad. Only words were so powerful that will get into your heart. You will change, you will get motivated. They really to die for him. That's what I mean. Words are
I know what
powerful.
you're saying there. But you are essentially agreeing with me, and I think with to some degree with Thunderous then, because whether the words were uttered out of his mouth or whether they were perfectly recorded doesn't seem to make a difference.
I think personal experience makes a difference. If you personally experience a prophet, it makes a big difference. Then because now, of course, the Quran
he's just the messenger, though. He's the messenger. He's sending. He's giving the perfect words, whether I read it or whether I hear it.
But you can see his character. You can see how he's conducting himself. You can see how he interacts with people, how he convinces people, how he, sometimes you only have to look at someone and you say, this one is trustworthy. This is his testimony. I will trust him with my life. And that's what the people did. His character is evidence. You know what I mean? I know it's maybe it's not of a high standard for you. I can understand it's not a high standard evidence for you.
Well, I mean, you could take the other perspective, right? No,
it's a high standard. To us,
You
it's
could
a
take
high
the other
standard.
perspective as well. Those people who, you know, and I think Jesus said it, and again, Thunderous, you can correct me. Blessed are those who didn't see, or whatever the case is, for they're, you know, they're even more blessed, type of thing. So those people who didn't meet Muhammad and still believe the word in the book and the hadiths, in some sense, you could understand how they could be more blessed or more faithful, or whatever the case is, because they weren't around with Muhammad. You could go, okay, it's easier if somebody was there and they saw it, although you're not pointing to anything specific. It's more kind of traits that you're alluding to. But those people who believe the word of God and not seeing, actually, they should be revered more, because they weren't around at the time.
But
Absolutely.
okay, I'll give you some perspective that you understand. Look, in this time, to be a Muslim is much easier. You don't have to. In that time, be a
But
Muslim and being a Muslim. I will give you a perspective that you understand.
Where are we
Just follow
going?
me.
Come on.
No. I will give you a perspective, Rob. Then you will understand deeply. In that time, in the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, if you accept Islam, it doesn't mean only your religion. It means your family will be against you. You were kicked out of the house. You have to be in a war. You have to fight in a war. So it's
you're
not.
lying there.
So
You're
in
lying
that time,
there.
you have to struggle more. So the how much more you struggle, how much worth it is. So to Allah, if you struggle
Yeah,
in
I
His
think that's a
path more,
gross generalization, Benny.
you know what I
I'm
mean?
not sure we're going to
And a
get any further.
plagiarism on top.
Today's much easier to be a Muslim. Today's much easier than in that time.
And this doesn't matter one bit. The other thing is, again, you are making claims. You're just saying, and you sort of expect us to accept it. We don't. You're saying that Muhammad changed his speech and suddenly he came with powerful words. He did not. The Quran is so badly written. How is that anything better than weak speech? It's not. So there is nothing there. So why go there? Just because the language has changed doesn't make the contents in any way any better. And this is why we are trying to get to the contents of the Quran and not just the style.
All right, let's I think let's move on.
Thank you.
I think we're going to, obviously, I think this is going to be sort of a theme where we're going to have discussions, but I'm not sure we're going to get to an end point per se. We'll do a couple more and then I think we'll call it an evening. 219. Or is it like a rainstorm from the sky within which is darkness, thunder and lightning? They put their fingers in their ears against the thunderclaps in dread of death, but Allah is encompassing of the believers. Okay. So again, it's just sort of reiterating to me when I somebody's got a. Can you guys hear something in the background?
No.
No. Okay. Okay. Cool. Something's going on in the background. I couldn't hear what that was. Okay. So again, this just seems to me more of the same thing. This, as I said to Stops early on, this seems to me to be, if we were to accept that this is in fact what was said, this seems to be a man saying something at a particular time to a particular people in order to, perhaps spread a bit of fear or to try to convince them to follow him, because it's just sort of repeating in different words the same sort of thing. So it just using different words to say the same.
And you'll notice as well, it's always Allah is against the disbelievers. He doesn't seem to be very proactive in saying anything about showing his affection, love, and admiration for those who do believe him, but he's very proactive in voicing his opinion and his vehement dislike of those who don't accept him.
Yes, he seems to be making that point. Hopefully, this won't take us too far. Would you agree, Benny, that a fair amount of more than half the Quran is pointed towards disbelievers? In other words, what will happen if you become a disbeliever?
I agree. I agree that that is talking about this, but don't generalize that term, disbeliever. If you see disbeliever, oh, he's talking about me. No, don't do that. That's the only point I'm raising here. Is if you see the word disbeliever in the Quran, don't assume that it's talking about you. You have to know the context. You have to know which people he addressing, which time, which circumstances it was. Like you said, Rob, and it was a good point that you raised. You said we have to look at which people he talked to, what was the context, history, and everything. That's very important that you don't, if you see disbeliever, you say, oh, it's talking about me. No, no, no. Don't generalize like that. That's
would you
not how
agree, Benny, would you agree that at some point we're going to come to verses that specifically, according to you, talk about us, i.e., not
Yes.
Thunderous, because he's of the book,
Yes.
the disbeliever like myself
Yes.
and stops the atheist,
Yes.
right?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yes.
So whether it's talking
You will
about,
come. You will come. Everybody will be addressed.
will be covered in the Quran at some point, right? So whether
Yes.
he's talking about specifically all disbelievers, according to you, or whether he's talking about the hypocrites or us or whoever, a great deal of the Quran is pointed in that direction. I think that was the only point I was making. Whether whichever version of a disbeliever, according to you, it is, it's often talking about them. Yep.
Yes. Yes. It's
Okay.
often talking about them.
Okay. So again, this is talking about that. Let's do stop. Should we finish on 220 or do you want to continue?
22.
22. Okay. Cool. So we're on 220 now. The lightning almost snatches away their sight. Every time it lights the way for them, they walk therein. But when darkness comes over them, they stand still. And if Allah had willed, he could have taken away their hearing and their sight. Indeed, Allah is important. Allah is over all things competent. I'm just going to read the Yusuf Ali translation as well. The lightning all but snatches away their sight. Every time the light helps them, they walk therein. And when the darkness grows on them, they stand still. And if Allah willed, he could take away their faculty of hearing and seeing, for Allah hath power over all things. What do you understand by that, Benny?
What I understand by that is that if that Allah gave them hearing and seeing to be productive in their using their tools, using the faculties. But if they don't want to use that faculties that Allah gave them, he can easily snatch them away from them.
Yeah, but it also says there that every time the lightning almost took their sight away, but each time the lightning helps them, they walk in it, and then the darkness grows on them and they stand still.
This is a parable. It's a very deep parable. I cannot really comment on this because it's a deep parable and have to research about it. Sorry.
Okay.
This is not a parable, please. Please don't. If your English is very bad, that's fair enough, Benny, but don't use words. A parable is a little story with a meaning inside there. It comes to a conclusion with a meaning. There is no story here. This is not a parable, and there is no meaning. This is Allah making a clear statement about you using in illustrative words about lightning and darkness and how he's keeping people in darkness. It's a consistent message going through from this surah's beginning to now. Allah can't stand, or he has nothing but contempt for people who do not accept him. It's a rant. It's a rant about how he feels about people who do not accept him.
Yeah, and showing off.
Well, I don't know about the showing off part. For someone to show off, they have to have something to show off. Allah's got nothing to show off.
Yeah, but he says he could take away. He could do all the things. You know, I am so powerful. I'm so competent. You know, this is like Trump. You know, I can do everything better than everybody else. I have the biggest brain, the biggest hands, the biggest everything, and I know better than everybody else.
Competent, Allah's impotent.
Yeah, but it says here, this is the whole point. He is exactly like Trump, always praising himself and not even realizing that people are laughing about him.
Well, according to them, of course, we put ourselves in the Muslim shoes. He is the greatest thing, so of course he can tell everybody how wonderful he is. Whether we believe it's a different story.
This is the point. Would you really tell everybody how great you are if you are great? No. This is the same thing. Would you tell everybody you are the best of all creators if you are the best? No. Would you tell everybody not to take other gods besides you if there are no other gods? No.
It kind of reminds me of a line from a particular story where a man turns around and says, if one man has to tell another man he is the king, he is then no longer a king. And this is
there you go.
This is very much what we're seeing here. Is Allah he's becoming nothing by emphasizing that he is something.
Do you want to comment on it, Benny? I think basically the claim is that, hey, what we would expect an all-powerful, amazing God to demonstrate his ability, not to keep saying it to people over and over and over, because if he does that, it actually makes it diminishes his majesty, to use another word, whereas he could demonstrate his majesty. Why does he have to keep saying it, if I understand it correctly?
From our perspective, the Quran is speaking of the highest authority. So Allah is speaking of his own of his authority. That means he says bluntly, without giving excuses, and he's the only one who can do that. Speaking of authority, so sometimes he humiliates people, because he has that authority to humiliate people or to mock them. He has the authority. So the Quran is about authority. So it's not we are not. For example, if Allah mocks some people, it doesn't mean that we have to mock them, because he has that position and authority to do that. So
sure, no, I don't disagree with that. He has the ability or the power to do it. The question is that what we would expect from an all-powerful, all-knowing God, especially if he knew what his creation is? Because to me, this doesn't seem to be a particularly majestic thing to do. If I know I'm going to create chess pieces and I'm going to chip off a few pieces, and it doesn't actually look like a knight, it looks more like a bishop or a pawn, and I keep mocking it for something that I have done, that doesn't seem particularly logical or majestic. It seems it seems to me more like somebody, like we're playthings to amuse the carpenter in my analogy, or Allah in this case. That's the way it seems to me. I mean, you could say, hey, I am the greatest, I am Allah, worship me once and you're done. But of course, we see a consistent pattern of him telling us how wonderful he is. And from us who are, critical thinkers, we're going, okay, say it once if you have to say it, but really demonstrate it through the majesty and so forth. And mocking people does not appear to be a majestic thing that an all-powerful creator could or would or should, we would suggest, do. Now, I know you're going to disagree, but that seems to be the position, because majesty doesn't need to do that. And again, we don't admire people who mock other people, and especially the case if it's an all-powerful entity mocking his own creation. Never mind other people, but his own creation. It just doesn't seem A, that logical, or B, that majestic
or loving, because he's supposed to be a loving God as well.
Well, Muslims don't suggest he's all loving. They do that.
Oh, of course.
No, it's not our own loving. No, we're not Christians. We're not Christians.
Okay, no. So let's not put that claim to you.
But it's supposed to be the same God, though. You're not Christian, but you're supposed to be worshiping the same God.
No, we don't worship the same God. We don't worship the same God.
Thank you. You don't. You're right. You're absolutely right. We agree on that one, Benny.
Because our God doesn't have a son. It's not 3 in 1.
Yeah. Let's not get into that. We can get into that another time. I agree. You're definitely not worshiping the same God. That's clear. Can you just, Benny?
The panelists shouldn't claim to know the mind of Allah.
Benny, can you just respond to what I've said there from an outside point of view? Because I've taken your position on a couple. I can see where you're coming from. Can you see how, from an outside point of view, and I know you'll have your view, and I want to hear what it is, that doesn't seem majestic to me, creating something, mocking your own creation when you knew that it was going to do what it's going to do, and you have all the power and majesty apparently in that is possible. That from a person who's looking in, trying to understand the majesty of this God of yours, would be problematic for people like me.
Okay. Picture this scenario: a prophet comes to a people, and he gives them the good news, and they always start with the good news.
What good news was it?
Okay.
Hang on.
I will get to my point. Then you will understand. You will understand the how it works. A prophet comes to people. The first they do is give them the good news. After they reject the good news, they give them a warning. And what they do, they mock the warning. They mock the prophets. And the warning is, okay, Allah will destroy you. And they mock, where is the Allah? Let him destroy me. Let him. And Allah responds, okay, you want it? Here is it. So he mocks them in that way, because they are
but is that
mocking.
Sure, but is that a majestic thing that you would expect from, if we look at kings, for example, and Allah is way better than a king, would we look at a king who mocked his subjects as a good ruler, or would we go, he has sort of some issues here? Because in my view, and again, you can give me a different view. My view, somebody that mocks somebody else, especially if you are better than them, isn't necessarily the most perfect being. And now we're talking about the God of everything. So it seems to me that God mocking is just like somebody who's got his feelings hurt and going, well, I'm going to mock you back now.
Okay, picture this scenario. A king sent his ambassador to the people and says, I'm the king. You have to, for example, just a silly example, but I want to raise a point. A king sends his ambassador to the people and he says, okay, you have to pay tax. And the people respond, we're not going to pay tax. F the king. We don't respect him. What do you think the king will do?
The king would probably, I'm guessing, force them to pay tax, but that analogy is not a good one, because tax is something that they know about anyway. What we're talking about here is Allah sending down his word to them, and they're rejecting that word, and they're mocking the prophet, the messenger. They're mocking the messenger. Now Allah gets upset with them for mocking the messenger.
Yes, because if you mock the messenger, you're mocking Allah. Because look,
exactly.
You have to see this as an ambassador. You have to see this. If if a king sends an ambassador to another country and you kill that ambassador or you reject that ambassador, it means you're rejecting the king. You don't.
Sure,
he's just a messenger. So
I understand
if a prophet, if you mock the prophet, it means you're mocking Allah.
Correct, but you seem to be making my point as well, which is that so indirectly they were mocking Allah, but Allah's response. Okay, fine, but Allah's response, instead of being a gracious and most merciful and most majestic of divine beings, instead he lowers himself, to use a term, to their level and mocks them back again. Is that what we would expect by looking at a majestic, all-powerful creator and him lowering himself to his creation because he's seemingly got his feelings hurt?
I don't see it that way. I see.
No, I know you don't, but that seems to be the logical conclusion.
I see it if he sends a messenger, that means, okay. Let me give you.
But focus on Benny. Before you give me an example, focus on the claim specifically. The claim that I'm making that you need to respond to specifically is that this appears to be an all-powerful God that is lowering himself, appears to have his feelings hurt, and because the people mocked his prophet, indirectly mocking him, he's now got angry and he's mocking them back again. And this is not what we would expect as outside people looking for the most majestic, most merciful, wonderful creator. We would expect a higher level of morality, but we are seeing the same level of morality that his creation are doing. So can you respond specifically to that?
I see it as authority. I see it as authority. This is what I see. Maybe I understand where you're coming from, how you see it, but for me, I see it as authority. If he sends a messenger, the messenger is the authority.
Sure, I don't disagree with that.
That authority, it means you're mocking the authority of the.
Sure, I don't disagree with that either. Yeah, they're mocking the authority. I'm not mocking that. We are not. That is not a point of disagreement. I'm suggesting that authority who's being mocked is acting in a way that we should not or would not expect, especially the divine, most amazing authority possible, to react. That's what I'm suggesting. So I don't deny that he's got the authority to do so. I'm questioning that if you suggest that this is a moral paradigm, Allah, and this is what he's doing, I'm asking you, is this what we would expect as the ultimate moral paradigm of goodness, to mock his own creation, or could he rise above it? Don't we in the real world, Benny, don't we revere people that can rise above being mocked and they don't respond back? So we look up at people who raise themselves above, the simple tit for tat responses. But Allah isn't doing this, so I can't look up at him because he's not raising himself above his creation in this view.
Okay, let me give you a perspective that maybe you didn't see it that way. Okay, maybe just follow me. Just follow me, and then maybe I'll give you some different mindset. It's all about
focus
the mindset.
Specifically on the claim.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. I will focus on the claim, but you have to follow me because it's very
You have to follow me, because we have a different mindset. Look, if a,
Yes, we
if a, okay, follow me, then you will understand. If a prophet comes to a people, that means the
Same
people.
thing.
No. Just follow me, then you will understand. If the people, when a prophet comes to a people, that means the people are like a cancer to other nations. They are doing things that obnoxious, very bad. They are criminals and everything.
Yep.
So if a prophet comes to them, it means the prophet want to fix them. So they give him the good news. Okay, you're messing the community. You're messing other nations. Stop
Yes.
with that.
Yep.
God is most forgiving. He will forgive you. But if they reject it, it means they will go on with their
Yes,
cancer.
I agree with
And
all
they
of
will
that.
cancel,
Yep.
and they will cancel all of the and the mercy of God. You have to see it that way. The mercy of Allah is He destroyed them, because otherwise it will
No,
cancel out. It will
Benny.
be infecting other nations. That's how we see it. I know it's very it's not really
The
what you're looking
question
for,
is,
but
what is the reaction of this God? He is getting mocked. And what is the reaction?
out of mercy.
What is the reaction of this God when he is being mocked?
That He will mock them.
Exactly. Is that what a
So-
God does?
And you're suggesting that he
I
will
don't know.
destroy them.
I'm
We're
not
not
a
talking
God.
about destruction here. We're talking about specifically the mocking action. And you're suggesting, or let me put it to you straight. Are you suggesting that that is the most moral thing that anybody could ever do, whether it's God or anybody else? Are you suggesting that the most moral thing to do is, if somebody brings you the good news and you reject it and they mock you, the most moral, the highest moral value is to mock them in return?
Is it? Look, this is it's a very deep. It's a very deep. How can I say
No,
it?
it's
You
not.
cannot really look. They maybe you think about mocking like it's nothing, but they were more than mocking. They were more than mocking, and you know what I mean. It's not only mocking and everything. It's the whole package. It's the whole package. So you don't see it as they
Okay,
only.
I think we'll move on. Okay,
Yeah,
I think
it's
this.
very
Yeah,
difficult. It's difficult.
yeah. Let's move on. I think we've covered that now. I think the viewers can make up their minds on that. Let's do 21 and 22, and then I think we'll call it an evening.
Yes.
Okay, 21. O mankind, worship your Lord who created you and those before you, that you may become righteous. Or Yusuf Ali, O ye people, adore your guardian Lord who created you and those who came before you, that ye may have the chance to learn righteousness. Okay, seems pretty straightforward. I don't know if there's anything
I
specific.
don't understand this.
Oh, okay.
I don't
Seems to me-
understand what this means.
Oh, okay. Why not stops? What is? Maybe I'm missing
What do
something.
you mean
So
a
share with me.
chance to learn righteousness? What righteousness am I going to learn from this God?
Oh, that seems easy. I mean, they were, according to Benny, they were on the wrong path, and so Allah, through His messenger, has given them, quote unquote, to use Benny's term, the good news, and that'll make them righteous. That'll bring them back to the right path.
Doing what?
Well, presumably whatever Muhammad or the Quran or the Hadiths tell them to do.
Is that the case?
Benny, am I accurately representing that?
Righteousness from Islamic perspective is what Allah seems to be righteous. So if Allah says, this is righteous, then this is righteous. This is not good, then it's just not good. Yes, you can say that.
Yeah, so these people are, would you agree then, the people, so this is saying to the people, hey, you guys went astray, essentially. I created you and those before you, and if you worship me, you'll become righteous. And again, obviously, we'd have to add bits to this by listening to my word and following what I tell you, etc., etc., etc.
Yes, following the example of the Prophet Muhammad, because Prophet Muhammad is a human, so we can relate to him. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So we
Okay.
can relate to him.
Yeah, so you'd follow his example.
Yeah, because he's a human.
Yeah.
Because if he sent the angels, we cannot relate to angels of other creatures.
Yeah, but again, of course, what we'd relate to most is the perfect being. So, and I think you would agree that Muhammad wasn't perfect. You can say he was a reasonably good example, but I think when Muslims claim he's a perfect example, I think that's problematic. But yes, I understand that
he's perfect in the context of a human being. A perfect, you cannot say he's perfect because only Allah is perfect. But in a sense of a human being, if you look at if you want to know how you treat your wife, if you want to know how you go
let's
with
not go
your
there.
let's not go there. Let's go now.
Yeah, tonight we can do that when that verse comes up. I'm happy for you to come back again, and we can do those. We'll definitely have an all day.
I was falling
on that sort of stuff.
asleep, and then I suddenly sparked into life.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah. No,
but
no. Fall asleep, please. Yeah, sorry.
The point that I'm trying to make here is that in the Quran, it says there's a God who creates me and all those before me. And now, all of a sudden, for 300,000 years, nothing happened. And people could do as they wanted. And now suddenly, this God comes and teaches me righteousness, says he will teach me righteousness, but doesn't tell me what righteous is. This is the problem that I have with this, because now it's going on a totally different place. I mean, this is a God who's strutting. He's doing his things. He's running up and down on the stage. I'm the biggest, greatest, most perfect thing ever, and I'm going to teach you how to do things right. But he doesn't tell me what is right. He's using words, but he doesn't tell me anywhere. All he does is he thinks that taking slaves is wonderful, beating wives is wonderful, exactly what you're saying, all these other things. But we can't go there at the moment because we don't have this information. We are only being told here that we have a chance to learn righteousness, but we are not told what this is.
Okay, but stops. If I can play devil's advocate for a moment, I think, and Benny would also say that there was some messages, according to Muslims, which was, the Torah and the Bible, although there was some corruption there. So they already had some of the messages. Muhammad's come to fill in the gaps and to correct some of the stuff. So it wasn't like they had nothing at all. They were just not following.
Can I interject?
But what is righteous? What is this righteousness?
Whatever the Bible or the Torah presume.
Okay, yeah, but is Lot being righteous when he has sex with his daughters? Is that being righteous? Is the very precise instructions in the Bible on how to handle your slaves, is that righteous? No, come on.
Can I respond to that? Can I respond to that quickly?
Yeah, sure, go ahead. And then Andres, you come in.
Look, from Islamic perspective, Allah already gave a light into the human beings. It means they already have goodness in them. You don't have to. How can I say it bluntly? You don't have to believe it in a creator to know to have goodness in you. You already have it in you. The prophets only came to perfect that goodness. That's what it means. You already have that inside of you. You already know if you do something wrong, you feel it. It's something you feel it. You feel some guilt. You feel some you regret. But the prophets came to perfect that goodness that you already have, the light that you already have inside of you, to perfect that. That's what the prophets came to do.
All right, stops. I mean, so if
I'm
we were
shut up.
Oh, well, okay. All right, Thunders.
Can I just,
go ahead.
Robs, can I just say something? I just received a text message from a friend of mine who I encouraged to listen to the show, and her comment was, I like the commentator, devil's advocate. He's like a goalkeeper in a football team. So there's a big shout to my friend that's listening there.
Oh, good. Oh. I hope that's a compliment. I'm not sure.
I can assure
I'll take it as one. But stops. Going back to it then, if we put ourselves in the Muslim shoes for a moment, and okay, obviously we're going to critique it, no problem. But to answer your question from a Muslim point of view, it seems, if I summarize, what Benny's saying is, hey, we're born with this, with some righteousness in us. And also, which he didn't say and I added, and I guess he would agree, is that the Torah and the Bible, to whatever degree, came before. So the righteousness is in us, plus it's been given to us by all the previous prophets who were all Muslims. And all that's happened now is that there was some corruption. They went astray a little bit. There's still righteousness there, but here's the extra righteousness, and that is and going to be and is being fulfilled, and all you have to do is follow it. I mean, I understand you would disagree, but would that be an answer at least, even if you disagreed with that, or is it incoherent?
No, totally not.
Absolutely
not. Completely not. Because if you take a human being 100,000 years ago, with all this goodness being in them, they go and they rape a woman. Now, God knows that they will rape a woman. Why is it that they create a human being 100,000 years ago that would rape a woman when they have all this goodness in them, and then waits another 100,000 years before he brings out a book? And then he says, well, raping women is still okay. There's nothing wrong with that. Well, we today, just after 2,000 years, we know that this was wrong. Why would a God carry on creating men who rape after 300,000 years? Why is there no evolution in the direction that men cannot rape another woman? Is it that difficult for a God?
Well, no, but yeah, I mean, Thunderous is going to say, and others would as well, that there's a free will. So
no, yes, I'm not going to say that. I just wanted to go on to the point of why we keep referring to other books and that there is some good because there's some good in the books. But in Islamic parlance, you can't make that statement. And I wanted to give an illustration. For instance, if I gave you a glass of water, only I took out my penis and urinated in it slightly, and I asked you to drink it, would you drink it?
I'm not sure that's an accurate analogy, though, from a Muslim point of view.
No, but it will be. But if you give me the dignity of finishing, let's just go along with the illustration. If I
I wouldn't drink it. Okay,
but the urine isn't poisonous. It's not going to kill you. Would you drink it?
No, because it's repulsive to me. That's an inbuilt thing that I wouldn't want to do that. That's part of our human nature not to do that.
But if I urinated in the water just slightly into this glass of water, and we allowed time for the urine to settle at the bottom because the urine is denser, say, as an example for the sake of this illustration, and you can sip from that water without actually coming in contact with my urine, would you still drink it?
Well, if I needed to, and in fact we could demonstrate that's the case, then yes, because then what you're saying is that the water on the top is pure because you've said it's all sunk to the bottom. If that's the case, if that is the analogy you're making, then by that analogy, the top part of the water is in fact back to purity again.
Right. If I then gave you a glass of water with poison in it, would you drink it?
If your analogy held exactly, and I knew where the poison was, and I had to drink, yes, I would.
But the
because it's simple deductive argument seems to me.
Of course. But the thing is, you see, with quoting other holy books in that are previous to the Quran, they shouldn't be quoting the holy book because it's like the water. The water is supposed to be there because the water is an analogy to life-giving water, waters of life, the fountain of life, as it were. So you can't refer to other holy books if they're polluted. You can't use them. Once they're polluted, that is it. They're poisonous now.
No, Thunderous. No, I disagree. I have to take the other side of the coin. If they know what is polluted, they can reject that.
But they don't know. The only way they do know is by what seems to be going along with what the Quran teaches. That all they're doing is they're sifting out, but like salt out of pepper, as to what. Oh well, that matches what Allah says, so we'll take that as truth.
Yeah, but that's okay. But that's a separate point. I would agree with you that's something we can challenge them on. But the principle that you're bringing, I don't think holds, and especially not with the water, because as I showed, if we know where the clean water is and we needed that.
This is the point, though.
You said to me we do.
No, but that was for the sake of the illustration between me and you. But Muslims don't, though.
Well, they will. Okay. That's your view.
The Quran hadn't been revealed just yet, had it? So they haven't got the whole Quran. This is 5 years into his prophethood. They haven't got the whole Quran. They've only got partial. So
but what he's asking, again, I'm playing devil's advocate here, but what he's asking is saying, hey, I've come along. There were some good things. I know what the good things are because Allah's revealed to me what the good things are. He's revealed to me what the bad things are. So I actually know what they are. Follow me. Yes, not everything's been revealed, but if you have faith in me, like Jesus, and I'm just using it as that, if you have faith in me, I haven't revealed everything, but follow me for the next 20 years, and I will reveal to you all the truth. Now, we can reject that, but it doesn't seem to me to be incoherent or anything like that. And if people take it on faith, as they used to do in those days, I don't see a problem from a Muslim point of view. We can challenge it, but I don't see it from a Muslim point of view being incoherent or irrational to do that. And if you see there is, show me where I'm wrong.
Okay, for starters, then, if they were following the previous books, then as soon as they saw Muhammad, they recognized him straight away for the false prophet that he was. The books hadn't been corrupted. We know that historically. So they would have recognized him for who he was. And these are learned people, not unlettered people like the Arabians were. They knew what their holy books taught. They would have instantly recognized him, whether you take it from the Genesis to Malachi, from from the Jewish perspective, or if you take it from Matthew to Revelation, if you took it from the Christian perspective, then instantly recognize this guy doesn't fit the narrative. What is coming out of his mouth doesn't fit the narrative. The attitude, demeanor, and the dialogue doesn't fit the narrative. There is nothing about this guy. There is nothing about what he's saying. There's nothing about the way he is saying it. There's nothing about his genealogy or his background or anything that fits the narrative. Here's a simple point. Every prophet in the Bible, then, if you want to go along with that narrative, every prophet in the Bible came from the nation of Israel or was worshipper of the God of the Bible. Muhammad came from a people out from the Jahiliyyah. He was worshipping the devil before he became a prophet of God. That has never happened in history before. If you follow the religious narrative.
Okay, but what you're doing, Thunderous, though, is you're arguing from the Christian perspective, which is fine.
No, I'm arguing from a biblical perspective. It's not a Christian perspective. It's a biblical, because this Allah and Muhammad are supposed to be the conclusion of that narrative. That's the perspective I'm coming with.
Obviously, the Muslims are going to see that differently. They're going to point to how the Quran is such a literary miracle, etc. And whatever he did before, that's even more miraculous, because he was, by your lights, if that were the case, he wasn't such a wonderful guy from the day he was born, maybe or maybe not. But at some point, he had the vision, the message in the cave, and now he really is. So in fact, a Muslim could argue, hey, he's even more miraculous because he wasn't born that way necessarily. He became that way. So that's even more evidence that Allah spoke to him. Because if somebody who was a devil worshipper suddenly became the messenger of God, my word, that's even an argument could be made that that's even more of the case for him to be a prophet, because he was so bad in the past. Look how he's changed. That is almost miraculous. So they could make that position, because all I was arguing is that it doesn't seem incoherent. And when you argued it from, to use your word, the biblical narrative. Now the Muslim will go, no, your understanding of the biblical narrative is wrong. And that's, of course, where you guys could have an interesting discussion. Definitely.
Sorry. I never heard of this before, this claim that he was a devil worshipper.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that.
Okay,
I'm not saying he was the devil. All I'm saying is that because Thunderous said that he was different to the other prophets. And I just said, well, you could make an argument that's even better. If, not that I would make that argument, but a devil's advocate could. And I guess you could respond to that anyway. But it could be seen as being even more miraculous.
He came with the same
That's
message.
all I'm saying.
From our perspective, he came with the same message.
Yeah. I understand your perspective, will disagree, and we would too, but I understand. So all I'm doing is going, okay, let's take it from your position and see whether we can dismantle it without bringing in the Bible as Thunderous understands it, to see does your worldview in any way make sense, or is it completely incoherent or irrational? And that's all I'm looking at. If it is irrational or incoherent, from your point of view as you believe it, then obviously we'd need to point that out to you, and you would have to respond if that's the case. And Thunderous, if you think it is irrational or inconsistent from the Muslim point of view, forget whether you agree with them, then let me know that. And then obviously that's a point that Benny would have to do. But then you have to put yourself in their shoes and go, okay, can I make sense of this given everything I understand? But again, maybe we can do this again another show. It's getting late, I suppose.
Yeah.
Rob, there's one thing here. I've just found it. The surah deals with a number of issues related, blah, blah, blah. This surah was revealed in Medina.
Which surah is this, sorry?
2. So chapter 2 was revealed in Medina, which means it was after Hijri.
And where did you get that? Just so that the viewers know, where's that?
Oh shit! I just closed it again.
Was it a tafsir or historical?
No, it's an Islamic Q&A site.
Okay, I think a lot of Muslims do take the Islam Q&A as quite a good site. Although I suppose people could. And I think, as far as I understand, that's the case. Benny, would you agree that these verses were revealed in Medina, or are you not sure and you have to do research on that?
I'm not sure and I have to do research.
Okay, no problem. Do that for next time. I'm happy to have you on again next week, so stay on with us. We're going to finish off one more verse here, and then I think we'll bring it to a close. That's good to know, Stop. So yeah, if you can let us know what the resource is, and Benny, you can come back then and let us know if you agree with that, because if it was in Medina, then obviously we can have a discussion about that, because that would have been, I don't know, how long is it, guys? Remind me. After he became a prophet, more or less? More than 5 years.
No, it's after 10 years.
10 years, right? Yeah, yeah. I thought it was more than 5. Okay, so we can come back to that. All right, let's just do this last verse for the evening, and then we'll call it a day. Hopefully, this doesn't take long, but who knows? He who made for you the earth a bed spread out, and the sky a ceiling, and sent down from the sky rain, and brought forth thereby fruits as a provision for you. So do not attribute to Allah equals, while you know that there is nothing similar to him. Or Yusuf Ali, who has brought the earth your couch and the heavens your canopy, and sent down rain from the heavens, and brought forth therewith fruits for your subsistence. Then not set up rivals unto Allah when ye know, quote, the truth. Okay, so this whole thing of spread out there is not in the corpus, because I was going to ask you about that, but it's not there in the corpus or in Yusuf Ali. The whole spread out, the earth a bed spread out, because obviously that refers to a flat earth, right? That wouldn't be so. We probably, but let me just ask you, Benny, so we don't go down that route later on when you join us. Do you go with the idea that there are scientific miracles in the Quran, or do you go with the idea that the Quran is a book that's got messages, but these things that refer to this is not to be taken scientifically at all?
That's a very deep question, because science means knowledge, right? If you break it down, it means knowledge.
Yeah, but what I mean by science, I guess, is something that's demonstrable today. So if this verse here were to be, every translation had it. We won't go into that tonight. But if that fact was the case, earth a bed spread out, etc., that would refer to a flat earth. So what I mean by science is, so the Quran says something, and we know today that is demonstrably false, and it's no way that it's going to change. It's not like the earth. We will discover the earth is flat, as an example. So what I'm suggesting is that's what I mean by science. Something that is so demonstrably the case, like the earth going around the sun, for example, that it would never change unless there was a cataclysmic or a miraculous event. So given that understanding of science, what's your view on claims that are being made in the Quran?
I think from my perspective, I'm not. I think if you approach the Quran, you cannot. How can I say? You cannot put it in a label. So you cannot say, oh, I will check what kind of scientific miracles it has. Or I think that's not the right approach. Personally, I think the right approach is guidance. Does it give me guidance? Does it give me but I won't take that road, that path to say, oh, it's a scientific thing.
Yeah. Okay, good. No, it's just good to understand, because if we come across some of those claims, then I know that you're not going to go and try and defend them as in like they are literally the case, or the Quran has predicted something, or whatever the case is. You're not going to go that route. And that saves us sort of asking you. I mean, we could have other Muslims that might defend that, and I know there still are some, but there are people like Hamza Torsis and many others now who have moved away, that realize the folly of going down that route. And I think you're probably on safer ground not going down that route. It's too easy to debunk that anyway. So not trying to use that as proof that the Quran is somehow miraculous. Okay, fair enough.
I think there's a room for that. I think there's a room for that, but I don't think it's the. How can I say it? If you go on that path, then you will put it in a label. You put the Quran in a label, but the Quran is not to put in a label. The Quran is just guidance. It guides you to what is right and to a straight path. If you put it in a label, and if you say, okay, let's see it scientifically what it says, then that means you put it in a label. And when that happens,
why is that a bad thing though? Why is that a bad thing though?
From my perspective, it takes away a lot from the Quran. If you put it in that label, it takes a lot of.
Really? Well, I mean, again, we asked you the question, or I asked the question: what would I expect from an all-knowing God if He gave me information that was so precise that He could predict, for example, quantum mechanics, or He could predict the germ theory of disease, or that we'd have the internet, or electricity would power the earth, or whatever?
Exactly.
Yeah, that sort of thing. If He did that, that would be more convincing. So to me, the fact that it's left out of the Quran puts a question mark over how if you're going to make any of those sort of claims, obviously I'm going to come back with those sort of things. So I think if one were, as a Muslim, going to be consistent, then you'd have to not talk about the Quran as being miraculous and using scientific examples or claims about, things that were going to happen in the future. I always forget the name of it, predictions or whatever the case is. You wouldn't be able to use any of those because obviously we could think of far better, more precise ones. So I guess that's the point. If you're going to go down that route, I could very easily show you how much better any prediction could be. Anyone, and I'll make that statement now, and we're only on Surah 2. As we go through, and I'm happy for you to come back every week or whenever you want to come back or whenever, you come back at any point and you point to anything that you think is the most wonderful prediction or scientific claim, and then we can discuss that and see, because I don't see that, and I think we could always improve upon that. So I think if you were going to be on safe ground, you wouldn't use any of that sort of thing at all to try and prove that. You wouldn't go down that line of reasoning, so to speak.
No, that's not my personal approach, because
Yeah.
I think we can go down the line of interpretation. I can interpret certain verses and say, okay, look, hey, it's a scientific miracle, and then you can come counter attack that. No, I see it differently. I see a different interpretation. So we go in the line of interpretation, and then we go in circles and circles. For me, I don't think. I think for some people it will work. For some people who can explain it, who have a knowledge in science, who can go in that approach. But it's not my field to go in that approach.
Well, I'm happy if you can bring anybody on here that wants to try and do that. I think that's a lost proposition, because again, all we have to do is ask, could God have made this more clear that we didn't need to go into interpretations? If I could read something that was clear, as Stop said, that electricity will power the planet, it will power your civilization I say unto you, Muhammad, and your followers, you will discover electricity from the clouds that you will harness and will power your civilization in the future. That would be quite an interesting statement. And if he told us exactly when electricity would be discovered and by whom, and to what degree it would be used, that would be, now you'd have my attention. And I think that would have the attention of every Muslim that ever read it. So I think we've got to be a bit careful, but I'm happy if you bring on somebody that wants to try and defend it. I just don't think it's a good way to go, and we've sort of gone down there before. Stops?
Benny, one thing I'd like to ask is, two things actually. The first thing is, why would you think a God takes so much time, writes so many books, and then instead of giving something that is really pertinent, something really compelling and convincing, the Jewish God says, well, you're not allowed to eat shrimps, and then the God in Islam says, no, never mind the shrimps, you can eat the shrimps, but don't eat pork. Well, and then instead of giving us something really good, we're getting this nonsense. And then don't you think that if a God were to write a book with some claims in it, that they should at least be basically correct? At least, this is my sort of major issue I have, that there is nothing in there that is correct. And I think there should be something, if this is a God, that I can go and check and see, okay, yes, it is correct what he is saying. But there's nothing there. So why do you think a God would give me nonsensical stuff and nothing correct? Why do you think that?
I don't see it that way. You see it that way. As when I approach the Quran, for example, I see a clear. For me, I see it clear. I see the world around me very differently. I see the definition of success very differently. I see the definition of creation very differently, because you and me are looking at the same sky, at the same world around us, what we can see, because we see, but you are looking at it with the different glasses, and I look at it with the different glasses. And to me, the Quran gives you a different view how to look at the world. So, for example, when you looking at the rain pouring down on the dead ground, and the dead ground comes to life, you're just looking at it, okay, it's natural, on a natural basis. But I see it more. I see, oh, hey, there was a dead ground. and now it's coming back to life because the rain comes down. So that means that I see it spiritually. When we are dead, we go. When we are dead, we go going back to life. So that's how I see it. That's how the glasses I have, Muslims have. We see it we approach the world around us, the worldview differently than how you approach it.
Yeah, no, I
Okay,
can
but you
understand.
haven't answered my questions.
Yeah, but stops, to be fair, that was such a leading question. He was never going to agree with that. So
Yeah, but why would a God give me eat shrimps, then changes his mind, said, no, don't, if shrimps are okay, don't eat pork. Why
that's a
would
good
you get
question.
that?
That's a good
But
question.
that's secondary. The secondary. The primary is the principle for my worldview is first you have to approach it. Is the claim that is the word of the Creator, is it true? When you come to that conclusion after research and pondering, reflecting, deeply pondering, researching, put a lot of effort. When you come to that conclusion, that, okay, this is the Creator word, then secondary issues like eating pork, don't eat pork, and everything, it means nothing then. You know what I mean? Because you already
But-
tackled the main point. Is this from
Yeah,
God or not? It's all
Ben-
other things are secondary. It means nothing.
yeah, Benny, Benny, let me ask you this, and maybe you can ponder this to take away. And just as a side note, Stops, have you got a hadith of the day?
Oh,
If you can just grab that quickly. Benny, it seems to me partly what you're saying in your case is that, hey, once I've accepted this, virtually anything else that comes into my worldview, I will be able to explain away or to ignore. So maybe for the next show, what I'd love you to do, and I'll do the same, by the way, you can ask me and I'll ask you, what would it take for you to recognize, or potentially what would have to happen for you to go, okay, this is such a problem. I cannot believe the Quran is the perfect word of God. Therefore, the end step of that is I cannot be a Muslim, because obviously there's millions, and we're going to have a show in 2 weeks' time, hopefully, where we'll document how many were the next Muslim. So clearly there are millions of people who are recognizing that Islam, in their view, is not true. So my question to you, to go away, you don't have to answer now, but to consider, and then next time we speak, what would you accept? What criteria would you say? You would say to me something like, Rob, if X, Y, and Z happened, that would show me that A, the Quran is not true, or Allah doesn't exist, and therefore I couldn't be a Muslim. So maybe you could ponder that and come back, and I will answer your question next time we speak, which is, Rob, what would it take to convince you that A, a God exists, and B, that it's the Islamic God? So I'll do that if you do the same one for you.
Okay. Yeah, that's good.
Okay, so
That's a good
ponder
idea.
that as a closing thing, and we'll do the hadith of the day, and then we'll do a thank you. If you guys are interested here, and put a 1 into the chat if you'd like to go to an after show, and a few of you would like to join us. Not all of us will stay on necessarily. Hopefully Mohammed will stay on, and to whatever degree others will stay on. We will have an after show. So 1 for an after show, or 2 if you're not interested, just so we know. And then I'll pass it now over to Stops for the hadith of the day.
And yes, I have watched Amin Avabi's Unboxed. I've actually taken a comment, and I'm on a crusade at the moment asking people, do you think, because this is what was the surprise of the one scholar of the Muslim who said that having sex with a 9-year-old can be okay under certain circumstances. And this is my crusade at the moment, asking Muslims, do you think that it is okay to have sex, any kind of sexual activity with a 9-year-old? So quite interesting. One thing, Benny, if you, for example, were to be asked, what would it take? Because Rob says, what would it take for you to change your mind? Wouldn't you expect that the Quran has something in it that is correct? Would you, if you were to be challenged, be able to bring something in the Quran that is verifiably correct? And what would happen if you could not? This is the interesting question. Okay, Hadith of the week is going to be earthquakes in the Najd region, and it's going to be by narrated Ibn Umar. The Prophet said, "O Allah, bestow your blessings on our Sham, this area. O Allah, bestow your blessings on our Yemen." And the people said, "And also on our Najd." So Muhammad tried again, "O Allah, bestow your blessings on our Sham. O Allah, bestow your blessings on our Yemen, which is north and south. And the people said, "Oh, Allah's apostle, and also on our Najd." And I think the third time, and it says here, I think the third time the Prophet said, there in Najd is the place of earthquakes and afflictions, and from there comes out the side the head of Satan. Sahih Bukhari 988-214.
Okay, there we go. I see a missed call. Somebody was asking me here in the chat. Okay, well, obviously, Muhammad Islam is M-Stacks. Well, M-Stacks, we're going to an after show. Sorry, I didn't see you there. I'm going to post a link here. You're more than welcome to join us in the after show now, and anybody else for that matter. I didn't see that. My apologies. Obviously, I'm not dodging you. I mean, please, come on. Let's be real here. We're asking for Muslims to come on, and it's not like we haven't had you on before. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to thank the panelists, obviously Why So Religious, who left us before, my co-panelist Thunderous and Stop Spamming, and thank you as well to Benny for joining us with a Muslim perspective. We do appreciate it. The guys are sometimes a bit strong, Benny, and I think actually they've been quite reserved. If you'd come here a year ago or something, you probably would have got would have had a lot more blunt response from some of my co-panelists. But thank you very much for coming on.
I have a thick skin. So no
That's
problem.
good. We need that in these discussions. So you're welcome to come on and join us. We will be doing this in the foreseeable future, at least for, as we go forward. So I'm quite happy if you want to bring somebody or invite other people, we're happy to have that as well, where we'll read these verses, we'll have this sort of a discussion, and we'll go from there. I'm going to limit the panel, so it'll probably be like 3 or 4 of us, and maybe 2 or 3 of yourselves as well. If we have 10 people, it's just too many. So it'll most likely, we'll keep it short, but you're more than welcome to join us again. So thank you very much. Thank you to my panelists. Thank you to everybody who's been viewing as well. We'll bring the show to a close now from a live show point of view, and we'll go to an after show. We'll be back next Friday at 8 p.m. I won't be there. I don't think I'm working quite late. So hopefully, Thunderous, you can join Stops, and we'll continue on, and perhaps yourself or Wise can read it, or however we do that. We'll talk about that. But for now, thank you so much. Good night, and we will see you again next Friday, 8 p.m.